Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, April 24th. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Asa Winstanley, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 201 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. We have another packed show for you today. We're hoping to connect with an organizer on Columbia University's campus as the encampment enters its second week and more campuses join in the Gaza solidarity actions. We'll also have a discussion with Professor Mohamed Abdou, who was just censured by Columbia University. And later on in the program, of course, Jon Elmer will take a look at videos from the resistance in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as a series of operations by Hizballah. But first, some of the news over the last several days in Gaza and the West Bank. The Gaza Government Media Office stated on Tuesday that over the last 200 days, more than 34,000 Palestinians have been killed, including nearly 15,000 children, and more than 77,000 have been injured. 30 children have died from Israel's engineered starvation policy, while approximately 17,000 children have lost either one or both of their parents in Israeli attacks. Nearly 500 medical staff, including physicians, specialists, paramedics, and volunteers, have been killed, and more than 300 medical workers have been arrested by Israeli forces. The Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor says that more than 130 journalists have been killed. This week, Israeli airstrikes and fire from naval gunships have continued to pound areas from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip. Starting with the south, Israeli airstrikes on Rafah near the Egyptian border have continued unabated, while Israel threatens a full-scale ground invasion. Activist Mohamed Abdou filmed this video on Sunday.
So as you see, airstrike inside Rafah city. It's near the tents and displaced camps.
That was activist Mohamed Abdou. Yesterday on Tuesday, journalist Ahmed Ibrahim posted a video of civil defense crews and residents digging through the rubble after the Israeli military shelled a home in the Salam neighborhood of Rafah. Civil defense told Al Jazeera that at least 3 people were killed and 4 others were injured, all from the same family. On Saturday night, Israeli airstrikes on Rafah killed 22 people, including 18 children, according to reports. The Associated Press reported that, quote, the first Israeli strike in Rafah killed a man, his wife, and their 3-year-old child, according to the nearby Kuwaiti hospital, which received the bodies. The woman was pregnant and the doctors saved the baby, the hospital said. The second strike killed 17 children and 2 women from an extended family. In central Gaza, rescue workers attempted to recover bodies and survivors after an Israeli airstrike turned a residential building into a massive crater in Deir al-Balah. In the north of the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces bombed a residential tower in the Al-Daraj neighborhood in central Gaza City on Monday. Also in Gaza City, Israeli airstrikes bombed the crowded Tufah neighborhood on Monday. In the northern city of Beit Lahia, the Israeli military issued new evacuation orders to the residents who have remained or returned there. Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights stated that this was indicative of a renewed military action and that, quote, 200 days later, Israel's genocidal military campaigns against Gaza continues unabated amid the international community's failure to hold Israel accountable. The United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, stated that Israel is still preventing food convoys from reaching the northern Gaza Strip. And according to the Gaza government media office, the impact of fuel and cooking gas shortages is particularly severe in northern Gaza, where families have been forced to rely on expensive and unsafe alternatives such as firewood, charcoal, plastic, and chemicals. The media office added that the emissions of toxic fumes because of the burning of such materials is leading to the spread of respiratory diseases, and the long-standing constraints on the entry of fuel have also affected food production facilities, including restaurants and bakeries, limiting people's access to nutritious meals and exacerbating food insecurity. Following the discovery 2 weeks ago of mass graves in the courtyard of Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest medical facility in Gaza, which was completely destroyed by the Israeli army, more mass graves were uncovered earlier this week on the grounds of Nasser Hospital in the southern city of Khan Yunis. At least 310 bodies have been recovered so far from the mass graves at Nasser Hospital, buried deep in the ground and covered with waste, according to the United Nations. Bodies discovered by family members and civil defense crews included those with zip tie handcuffs still on their arms, others wearing hospital scrubs, women and elders, some bound and stripped of clothing, and bodies with intravenous lines, catheters, and bandages still attached, clearly patients who were executed. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reported on the situation around Nasser Hospital on Monday.
Withdrew from Khan Yunis on April the 7th after 4 months of intense raids and airstrikes, leaving behind a trail of destruction and mass graves. The teams who recovered the dead say some were shot from behind, execution style. Others were found with their hands tied behind their backs. Many more are believed to be buried on the grounds of the largest medical facility in southern Gaza.
The identified bodies were delivered to their families, and we as civil defense keep the unidentified bodies, take note of any distinguished marks for each of them, then we bury them.
Another mass grave, yet more Palestinian bodies are retrieved from this side whose names might not be remembered. Their identities are largely lost in an unprecedented war.
Lost but remembered, those who have been identified will now receive a proper farewell. For countless others, the search continues. More than 7,000 people are still missing across the Gaza Strip, most of them women and children.
That was Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reporting from Khan Yunis on Monday. The charity Save the Children reported that since October 7th, the rate of attacks every month on medical facilities and healthcare workers, quote, has been higher than in any other recent conflict globally, standing at an average of 73 attacks each month. Becky Platt, a pediatric nurse at the field hospital in Rafah, told Save the Children that, quote, we've recently seen an influx of children from other hospitals with wounds and lost limbs, often needing skin grafting and multiple operations. But even getting hold of simple things like strong pain relief is a major challenge. When children have to undergo a procedure to save their limbs and avoid infection, we are forced to do it with less pain relief than we'd normally use. So I brought bubbles and games on my phone to distract them, but the reality is that a lot of these procedures need strong pain relief. That is causing huge distress, and it will also add to long-term psychological damage. The nurse added that, quote, we treated a 10-year-old boy who had some shrapnel in his thigh that had shattered his femur. He lost a lot of muscle and tissue, so he needed skin grafting and also had an external fixator on the leg. He had multiple operations, but he was so distressed by the way his leg looked that he couldn't even look at it. He was doing this silent crying that was heartbreaking, but this is a standard story. Children are psychologically destroyed by everything that's happened. Our colleague Maureen Claire Murphy reported this week that, quote, Israel is abusing UNRWA employees detained in Gaza in order to extract forced confessions against the agency, with detainees describing being subjected to acts of torture. The forced confessions are likely to be used by Israel in an attempt to incriminate UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees, Maureen writes. She adds that, quote, Israel is seeking to starve UNRWA out of existence through smears and unsubstantiated allegations aimed at drying up the agency's voluntary funding. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the embattled agency, told the UN Security Council last Wednesday that Israel continues to block the provision of life-saving aid as part of its insidious campaign to push UNRWA out of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. More than a dozen countries, including top donors US and Germany, froze funding or suspended future support for UNRWA after Israel alleged that 12 of its employees were involved in the October 7th attacks led by Hamas. The allegations were made public by the agency on January 26th, the same day that the UN's World Court stated that there is a plausible risk of genocide in Gaza, Maureen writes. In her report, she adds that UNRWA staff released from Israeli detention told their employer that in addition to ill treatment that may amount to torture, they were, quote, subjected to threats and coercion and pressure during interrogations to incriminate the agency. These, quote, forced confessions against the agency included that the agency has affiliations with Hamas and that UNRWA staff took part in the October 7th attacks against Israel. According to UNRWA, some staff members were, quote, detained during the performance of their official duties for the UN, including while working at UNRWA installations and in one case during a coordinated humanitarian movement. Detained UNRWA staff were subjected to a litany of abuses, they say, such as beatings, including by doctors, attacks by dogs, and threats of rape and electrocution. The agency said that its employees underwent treatment akin to waterboarding and had guns pointed at them. UNRWA staff also experienced verbal and psychological abuse, threats of murder, injury, or harm to family members, humiliating and degrading treatment, being forced to strip naked and being photographed while they are undressed, and being forced to hold stress positions. For much more, read Maureen Claire Murphy's report, Israel Subjects UN Workers to Torture, on electronicintifada.net. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers carried out a 2-day incursion last week inside the Nur Shams refugee camp in the northern city of Tulkarem. Our colleague Tamara Nassar reports that during the 54-hour operation, at least 14 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces, including 3 children. The Israeli military carried out the operation with domestic intelligence agency Shin Bet and Israel's border police. The invading forces damaged and destroyed homes, commercial stores, roads, and other infrastructure, and left at least 25 Palestinians injured in the wake of the military raid, Tamara reports. Ayed Abu Aktesh, Accountability Program Director at Defense for Children International Palestine, said, quote, the Israeli military invasion into Nur Shams refugee camp marks the deadliest days in the occupied West Bank since the Second Intifada. The Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz reported that when the invasion began on April 18th, more than 120 military vehicles carrying dozens of soldiers raided the refugee camp from multiple entrances and checkpoints, including through the Avnei Hefetz settlement, located on the western edge of the northern West Bank near Tulkarem. Israeli troops besieged the camp, as well as several homes within it. Israeli troops occupied several homes, turning some of them into military bases, barracks, and observation points, according to Defense for Children International Palestine. Israeli military reinforcements, including 3 bulldozers, sealed the camp, trapping residents inside, while others were unable to enter. Throughout the military raid, Israeli troops deliberately prevented ambulances from reaching wounded and killed Palestinians, the human rights group reported. The Israeli invasion resulted in widespread devastation, Tamara writes. Haaretz reported that bullets and grenades have left gaping holes in the walls of homes. Fragments of shells and LAU missiles are strewn across open spaces. Israeli bulldozers demolished infrastructure in the camp, damaging electricity, water, sewage systems, and telecommunication networks, leading to power outages during the military raid. Armed Palestinians in the camp confronted the Israeli invaders to protect their community, injuring several Israeli soldiers. Jon Elmer will have more on the resistance in Nur Shams later on in this broadcast. Earlier this month, the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention issued an active genocide alert over the situation for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, declaring that, quote, Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians across Palestine. 2 weeks ago, violence against Palestinians in the West Bank accelerated as large groups of Israeli settler mobs launched attacks on more than a dozen Palestinian villages following the disappearance of an Israeli teenager. For much more on the situation in Nur Shams and across the West Bank, read Tamara Nassar's latest reports, Deadliest Days in the West Bank, and Genocide Alert issued over Israeli violence in West Bank on electronicintifada.net. In Jerusalem last Friday, an Israeli court ordered the release of renowned Palestinian feminist scholar Nadra Shalhoub-Kevorkian after she was arrested at her home in the Armenian quarter of the Old City. Maureen Claire Murphy writes that Shalhoub-Kevorkian, a professor in the Faculty of Law at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, was released by the court on condition that she attend an interrogation and sign a financial guarantee, according to al-Balah, a group that advocates for the rights of Palestinians in Israel. Maureen reports that, quote, Israeli authorities reportedly accused Shalhoub-Kevorkian, a Palestinian from Haifa who holds Israeli citizenship, of incitement to terrorism over comments she made during an interview on the Makdisi Street podcast. The police claimed in court that Shalhoub-Kevorkian had engaged in, quote, serious incitement against the state of Israel by making statements against Zionism and even claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. The police, which are under the authority of far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, noted Shalhoub-Kevorkian's significant influence and said that they found posters in her home, quote, portraying IDF soldiers as an occupying army. During a court hearing, the state's lawyer pointed to Shalhoub-Kevorkian's factual descriptions of Israel's use of lethal force against Palestinians and the withholding of slain Palestinians' bodies, which are returned to their families in degraded conditions, as examples of the professor's dangerousness. The state lawyer also raised suspicion that Shalhoub-Kevorkian has ties to Defense for Children International Palestine, a respected Palestinian human rights group that is among several such groups engaged in international advocacy declared as terrorist organizations by Israel. For much more on this story, read Maureen Claire Murphy's report, Court Orders Release of Palestinian Feminist Scholar Arrested in Jerusalem, on electronicintifada.net. And finally, journalists in Gaza are not only documenting the egregious and accelerating war crimes committed by Israeli forces, especially against Palestinian children, but they're also showing us scenes of joy and laughter. So we wanted to also include these two videos in this live stream report today. And that's just some of the news from on the ground in Palestine over the last few days. Please go to electronicintifada.net to read some of our crucial new features by writers in Gaza, now up on our homepage. And you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with Ali Abunimah. Coming up, we're hoping to hear from a student on campus at Columbia University. We'll also be joined by a professor, Mohamed Abdou, who was censured by Columbia. And we'll get a full update from Jon Elmer on the latest military developments across Gaza and the West Bank. But first, we have a very special guest, Ali.
Yes, let's go straight now to Gaza. And we're very happy to have back with us our dear friend and colleague, Abubaker Abed. Abubaker, are you with us? I hope we have not. Here he is.
There he is.
Yes,
Hi, Abubaker. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you too?
We're so happy to see you. Abubaker, I know that we may only have you for a few minutes because the electricity and the internet
yes.
are not may not last. So first, let me just ask you how you're doing. How's your family? What's the situation around you right now?
Well, it's the updates are always usual because yes, bombings continue, and yeah, especially around my area in the southern parts of the territory, the areas there have been repeatedly targeted by Israeli forces. And yes, today we have been we've woken up on a very, very explosive airstrike in the same area. So that area in the southern parts of the al-Balah has been continuously been targeted and attacked, and which bodes badly that probably they're thinking of a military ground invasion or a military ground operation in the area. But yes, also east of the territories in Deir al-Balah, the eastern outer skirts are also being bombed by Israeli tanks, and residential buildings there have been hugely affected and have been damaged by those bombs and also other airstrikes. At the same time, unfortunate to say that foreign infections have been widely spreading within the community as a result of population, also malnutrition, and the incapability of hospitals and doctors to isolate infected cases from others, because areas are too increasingly overcrowded, because you're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in just a few kilometers square, which is absolutely illogical and complicated to do anything for those cases.
It's overwhelming,
Yeah.
and it's very difficult to keep up hope and strength and optimism in such a dire situation. But Abubaker, when you were on last time, you gave us all a great deal of hope and smile and joy when you told us about something, and you promised to come back. But before I ask you to talk about it, I'm going to ask Tamara to play a little video that you sent us a couple of days ago, and then we'll ask you to talk about the video.
Yes, sure. We see hope. This is our yellow rose. It is, in fact, the best thing we have at the moment, because we see hope through it. And despite destruction, despite the truly unbearable circumstances we are living under at the moment, we still seek out hope. We still see hope. We are sending here the message of me, the message of everyone from Gaza, especially in my area, that we want you to be with us. We want you to have our back always and every time, because we see hope in you. We are sending, and I, Abubaker, is sending a message of love, a message of hope to every one of you from Central Gaza and Deir.
I love that. Abubaker, tell us about what daily life is like right now, and what it means to take care of that beautiful rose bush right there.
It just it means everything, because it's already the only thing that we can really do at the moment, because everything around us is just destruction, it's just despair, as Dr. Ali said, and everything just bodes badly. There is nothing that you can really acquire only probably an atom of hope or desire or determination. But yes, Palestinians in Gaza are made of sterner stuff. Palestinians in Gaza feel hope. And as I said in the last live stream I showed up with you here, we are beautiful souls. And even that Gaza is now darkness, bleakness, and somberness, and there is no light you can see in Gaza, as a lack of electricity, and that Israeli forces or the occupation has just cut off electricity since the war broke out on October 7th. And Israel, there was an aerial photo I took around 2 days ago, and it just showed that there is no light in Gaza, and there is a far light coming from the occupied territories in Israel, which is not Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories. We are physically in the dark side, but our spirits, our souls are shining on the bright side. This is how we see hope, and this is what we are made of. Because already, such circumstances, we are talking about more than 200 days of this genocide. But that has gone beyond what the word genocide, means. Because already, when we see people that, I've just been at the hospital today for a very, very urgent case, but I don't want to bring that to you. Yes, it's a normal thing, because you already know that I'm quite struggling with my weak immune system, but it's all fine. Which is already that when you see people, children are sleeping on the ground, on the floor, mothers are crying out of pain or in pain, and at the same time, casualties, injuries are receiving a treatment on the floor. Blood is splashed on the floor in just a horrifying way, which is absolutely more than criminal. It's just like, I don't know. I have no words. And it's just like, people, I don't know why politicians think it is too much for Palestinians to have one day of tranquility, one day of calmness. It's been a lot. It's been very, very much on us. That hasn't got to do with innocent civilians in Gaza who are paying or who are sacrificing their lives and everything just for this war. You can't really imagine that people are sleeping on the floor, or sleeping, on the garbage, on the litter. It is very logical that we are being treated as animals. Probably, if you think about it, animals do live a better life, because we are, we don't have any means of life. There is no life in Gaza, because you're talking about more than 2 million people displaced in tents. We are now in the summer, which means that snakes and lizards get out in tents for people. You are going to face another humanitarian crisis, that these places are not good for living for these people. So I just want to say that even yesterday, we talked about 2-year-old niece already, that she licks the screen every time she sees the background of ketchup and French fries. Only yesterday, there have been more than 20 bombings in Deir al-Balah. Every time a bombing happens, she sobs in pain. She sobs in fear and panic. She's already terrified. She's already, horrified every time, and she starts crying, and just we need to hold her close and everything. We can't deal with this much of trauma. The traumatic picture now in Gaza is absolutely complex and very complex, which we need a very, very urgent solution with. And something very important to tell you, that we are a people that are not extra to this world. No, we deserve life, we teach life, and we just need to make sure that this has to stop as urgently as possible, as soon as possible. We don't want anything more, because it's already enough. It's just enough.
Abubaker, while I was listening to you, by the way, I just want to say, for those who are listening to this program rather than seeing what the video that Abubaker sent us showed us, a perfect yellow rose that he had raised and grown in Gaza, and that he told us about on his previous visit with us on the live stream. And I know that that's something that many people found very moving, and I do too. And one of our viewers is asking us, Abubaker, we all want nothing more than for this genocide to end, and end now. Someone asked, are you seeing the protests, particularly the protests that are sweeping across university campuses in the United States right now for Gaza, demanding an end to this genocide? Are you seeing them?
Yes, I am. And it's really pleasing and delightful. We really salute these people behind these protests. We really salute these protesters. We really want to encourage them to continue, because I think every single protest matters. Every single word against this genocide matters. Dr. Ali, there is something important that people have to know and to listen to very importantly, which is the difference, the core difference between us and the world is that Palestinians are dreaming to live, while all the world are living to dream. This is the difference. We are dreaming to live as Palestinians, but all the world outside are living to dream. That's the core difference. So instead of going just like, pursuing our dreams and just thinking about what is next, we are really thinking about the next second. Are we going to stay alive or not? Because already there's something very important, which is, already there was a bombing in the pre-dawn around 2 a.m. more in the morning, in the pre-dawn. Today, I just said that this hit our house. I didn't know how I'm still alive at the moment and how I woke up, because that was absolutely rattling. Literally, I was sleeping on my bed. My bed was rattling, and the doors just forcefully opened, and then the windows just rattled, and the windows were affected, by the way, so they were broken. And that, what is next? It is a traumatizing that you are sleeping. Imagine yourself, you are sleeping and someone bringing up a drill and doing something over your head. How is that going to be for you? You're going to kill him, absolutely. But it is the same thing. It's been 201 days. There are drones buzzing over our heads. There are bombings that are continuing every single second, all day. This is absolutely unimaginable. We need people to understand these little details. I know it's quite probably complicated to understand over this context, because I know it's just that you don't live it, but we need people to understand what is behind this genocide. Not only that we have casualties, we have injuries, and that we are being killed, we're being etc. etc. No, we want to bring the show to people so that they live the scenes with us. That's what we want. That's what I tell you all the time. No, I'm hopeful, I'm smiling, and everything. Nothing, as I told you, as I promised you every time, and I will promise you every time. Nothing. You will never ever see me upset. No, I'm smiling all the time. You will never ever see me upset. You will never ever see me sad. No, at all. Nothing will make us so. It's just about that we want people to understand what it is really like for Palestinians in Gaza. What are they going through at the moment, and what is the thing for them at the moment like? How are they living? How are they eating? How are they, drinking? It's all about just every single detail. We need people to understand that our life has just gone beyond, the badness of a thing, has just gone beyond the rational limits of a bad life. We need people to understand that. We need people to know that Palestinians in Gaza have been going through hell during 201 days in this genocide. And just we need people to really not sympathize with us, but to stand with us against genocide. We need you to really, really stand with us.
And Alhamdulillah, salamtak. It's terrifying to hear how close that bombing was. And
it was 100 meters. It was just 100 meters.
And I hope that nobody was killed, but we know that people are being killed almost every hour in Gaza. And when you describe the trauma of your niece and the suffering and the trauma that she goes through as a young child who can't understand what's going on or why it's happening, and to think that there are 1 million children in Gaza who are experiencing the same horror that your niece is experiencing, if not much worse, those children who are lucky to survive. And so we so appreciate you being willing to share it, so that we can be aware and remember why we're protesting, why we're encouraging people to continue the protest, to never stop demanding an end to this genocide right now. People in Gaza, you, Abubaker, your family, everyone around you, you deserve to have a safe, normal life. And it is an absolute crime and a horror that the United States government, the European Union, the German government, and Arab governments, sadly, continue to conspire to allow this to carry on for even another day.
They are liable. They are all liable for this genocide. Everyone is liable for this genocide. Is silent, and just finally, I know it's been, you know, because the circumstances are always changing, and just like it's always getting harder to speak up and to show up with you. It's just like, you know, a difficult matter. But you know, every time think about me that these words of Abubaker may be the last. This is not hopeless. No, I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful. But what I just want you to do and all the time think about is that these people have gone through the most hellish times ever. If you are going to tolerate it at any point in your life, then you should really, really rethink your humanity. This is one of the things we want to say. And by the way, following what you have said, Dr. Ali, we have just like a small point that we want to conjure up to the audience, we want to bring to the audience, which is talking about the international governing body of sports or of football, FIFA. Already everyone knows about FIFA. There have been more than 200 athletes killed in Gaza, while hundreds have been wounded. Sports facilities in Gaza are 54. Only 7 are still sound. Yet, FIFA hasn't commented on the Israeli aggression on sports in Gaza. Meanwhile, Ukraine, when it was invaded back in 2022, FIFA banned Russia, the oppressors, just 3 days after the incidents. Again, from an Islamic perspective, you're talking about more than 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza. Already, 99% of them are Muslims, including around 1,000 sheikhs and Islamic scholars. They have been killed. Also, more than 500 mosques have been partially or completely destroyed by Israeli forces. Yet, the International Parliament of Religions in Chicago has not said anything. Again, another thing, which is medical crews. The Gaza Ministry of Health has just announced that more than 400, around 450, medical healthcare professionals have been killed, including doctors and nurses. Also, 520 have been wounded, and almost 26 hospitals have been destroyed by Israeli forces. Only 10 are now minimally functioning. Yet, no one has done. And okay, there has been a condemnation of Israeli forces for that, but already we haven't seen any actions on the ground to ban Israel from doing so. And in central Gaza, only 3 days ago, on April 21st, Al-Aqsa hospital, which is the second hospital only in central Gaza where more than 1 million people are taking shelter, has been bombed by Israeli tanks. And yes, yet no one is doing anything to stop this genocide. Giving these figures to all people, because people do want to know figures, and that this hasn't done anything, hasn't moved them to do so, it is just horrifying and horrible that people are still silent. Again, one final thing, I don't want to just like, you know, it is the internet problem, it's the electricity. It's my pleasure always to talk to you. The good thing is the yellow rose, there is still, if I wish I could bring that yellow rose. There is another yellow rose on the tree, on the plant. Also, maybe another good thing, we have a yasmin tree.
Beautiful.
Thing.
Well, I hope you'll send us pictures of that too. And these things are a reminder, Abubaker, that we always plant things with the hope. When we plant a seed, we look forward to seeing what will grow. So planting is itself a sign of steadfastness. It's an act of hope. It's an act of resistance. It's an affirmation of life. And it's something that we celebrate with you. So thank you so much for that. And before you go, I just want to remind people that in addition to being a wonderful contributor to this live stream and a friend whose face we love to see as often as we can, you're also an incredible writer and journalist. And so we can't get enough of you. And for all those who can't get enough of you, they can read your articles at the Electronic Intifada. There you see Abubaker's author page, and you'll see what a fantastic journalist he is. And Abubaker, I hope you will write something for us again soon, because writing too is an act of resistance. And with your writing, you also deliver the message and help to motivate people to continue demanding an end to this genocide.
You are the echo of our voices. We will always continue with you being around. We will never ever stop. And there is something I always wanted to tell you live, but it's just like I keep forgetting about it. It is behind Nora this time. It's not behind you, Dr. Ali, which is I need that EI crest once we meet.
Absolutely.
You will get all of them. I promise you. I promise you. You'll get all our stickers, everything. They're all for you.
Wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Every time it's just like, we say it. I need that. I need that. But there's no way I can be shy this time. We're already.
No.
Don't be shy.
I'm not a guest.
No, it's all for you.
Absolutely. With pleasure.
Thank you.
With pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's my
Thank you
pleasure.
so much, Abubaker.
Again and again. You are our yellow roses. You are our hope. Keep that in your mind. We will always be yours. You are. I'm already one of you, one of yours. I'm already one of your own. And it's just about that. I promise you to keep the same Abubaker you have known for a while. It's just like this.
Thank God. Thank God. And we will see you very soon, Abubaker. Come and join us again.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
friend.
And much love to you and everyone around you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, it's always so good and so hard seeing him. So glad that we could make that connection today.
Yeah, we until literally just before he came on, we didn't think we were going to be able to make the connection.
Yeah.
So we were so happy that he could join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was talking about, medical workers and physicians and volunteers being killed, and these like world international bodies of medical associations not saying a word. He's talking about FIFA not saying a word, about all the athletes killed. And I'm also thinking about these universities in the West. Who haven't said a word.
Every university has been bombed. And I mean,
every single one in Gaza.
Abubaker, by the way, Abubaker, like so many other young people in Gaza, he was a university student.
Yeah.
He is a university student. His education, I mean, even if the war stops tomorrow, there's no university for him to go back to. There's no university for him to continue his studies at, to plan for that future in Gaza. And so it is particularly outrageous, and we're going to be talking a lot about that in the upcoming segments, that the universities in the West are not only not standing with their colleagues, their peers in Gaza, but are actually standing against them.
Right. Absolutely. So we've been trying to get in touch with students on the campus at Columbia University in New York City, but it's been a little difficult. They're very busy. But
A
we're
little
going to
bit.
a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about what they've been up to, and then we're going to bring on Mohamed Abdou, a professor at Columbia, who has been thrown under the bus by the administration. So sustained and militant protests have been organized on campuses across the US and also in Sydney, Australia, in direct opposition to university administrations' relationships with Israeli institutions and investments in corporations that aid and abet Israel's genocide in Gaza. Sustained and militant protests have been organized. I just read that. A wave of encampments on campuses have erupted, beginning with Vanderbilt University in Tennessee several weeks ago and spreading from the East Coast to the West Coast at Ivy Leagues and state universities. But over the last week, students at Columbia University escalated their own protests, bringing tents and banners to establish a liberated zone in defense of students whom the university has criminalized for defending Palestine. This followed Columbia University's President Minouche Shafik's appearance last week before the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, in which she threw Columbia students and faculty under the bus to appease members of Congress and their efforts to smear anti-genocide protesters as anti-Jewish bigots. On April 18th, in an attempt to quash the expanding protests at Columbia, Shafik authorized the New York City Police Department to remove and arrest students in the encampments. The university also suspended several students. Here's a video of one student, Mariam Alwan, member of Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, being arrested by cops. Another student, also named Mariam, was also arrested and suspended. She tweeted that, quote, "For my organizing with SJP, I've been doxxed, chemically attacked by IOF soldiers, smeared online, followed by the NYPD anti-terrorism unit, gotten brutalized by cops, been suspended, evicted, arrested. I am not exaggerating when I say there is nothing they can do to silence us. To be doxxed for Palestine is an honor. To be suspended for Palestine is an honor. To be arrested for Palestine is an honor. When I see that Palestinians in Gaza are telling us to keep protesting, nothing else matters. Everything I do is for Palestine, and I regret nothing." At nearby New York University, the NYPD arrested and released more than 130 people on Monday, including members of faculty who were protecting their students from arrest themselves. On Monday, NYU constructed a plywood wall around an area of campus in an attempt to prevent the protests from spreading. After New York City police arrested and removed students, the protests grew. And for a week now, the encampments have not just remained on campus, but have spread to over a dozen other campuses across the US. So we were trying to get a student protester on, but as I said, it was hard to connect, but we'll try to get them on at a later date. But yeah, I mean, here in the Bay Area, we have encampments at UC Berkeley. I think one at Stanford just went off. And then in Northern California, you know, a couple hours north of where I am, students at Cal Poly Humboldt led this incredible, there they go, where they learned, you know, someone was saying on Twitter that these students have grown up in an era where they learned how to do, you know, defense rehearsals for, you know, active shooter drills, which is a completely dystopian thing and very American, but they're using those skills now to defend themselves against active shooters who are, of course, the cops trying to arrest them and break up the encampments on their campuses. So it's pretty extraordinary to see.
Yeah, and it's also extraordinary that the solidarity has been so strong on the campuses since the beginning of this genocide. Let's also remember that students at Brown University back in February held a 1-week hunger strike in solidarity with Gaza. Students at Yale University just ended an 8-day hunger strike. And so what we're seeing now is the culmination of months of building protest. And we're seeing an incredible backlash. And that's who our next guest is going to talk to us about. He is Mohamed Abdou, a visiting professor at the Department of Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies at Columbia University, which of course is in New York. He is a former assistant professor of sociology at the American University of Cairo, and he completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Cornell University. Mohamed Abdou is also the author of Islam and Anarchism, published in 2022 by Pluto Press. Mohamed has also been spending time with the students at their encampment on the Columbia University campus. Mohamed, we are really pleased to have you join us right now.
Hi, Mohamed. Oh, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's an honor to be with you, Ali and Nora.
Thank you, Mohamed. We're going to talk about what has happened to you, but first I want to ask you, you've been spending, as I said, you've been spending a lot of time with the students at the encampment on campus amid continuous threats and acts of violence from the Columbia University administration. Can you tell us what the mood is like there among the students?
Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to be with you all. Usually I start any public discussion with Musa's dua, so just allow me that if you don't mind. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma shrah li sadri, O Creator, may you open thy breast, wa yassir li amri, and make my affairs easy. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي, and undo the knot of my tongue such that my speech becomes accessible to those kindly listening. And happy Pesach to our Jewish siblings. And so far as the students, mashallah alayhum, they are resilient, resurgent. They are our beacon of hope, of light. They are our spine, and the whip of a tongue that we speak through and with insofar as values and justice, our compass, Palestine, and Turtle Island. Yesterday was a very difficult night, I believe, for all of us because of threats insofar as the calling in of the National Guard, riot police, the prospective use of tear gas, and perhaps even bullets. But alhamdulillah, I passed by this morning, and they always fill me with a great deal of resurgent energy. They have electrified faculty. They have been and have provided a great deal of inspiration to all of us. And mashallah, they're very organized, more than a lot of faculty are. So
that's great to hear. And in fact, overnight, the students at Columbia released a statement saying that they had been threatened, as you said, by university administrators with whom they were in discussions, that they would send in the NYPD, the New York Police Department, again, and even the National Guard, which is shocking considering the infamous history of the National Guard attacking student protesters during the Vietnam War and killing 3 students at Kent State University in Ohio. And of course, in 1968, the police attacking students at Columbia University. So it really is an infamous history that's being repeated. And now, of course, the person behind these threats and actions is Minouche Shafik, the president of Columbia University. And earlier this month, Mohamed, she appeared before the House Committee on Education and joined hardline pro-Israel members of Congress in attacking you and 2 other Columbia professors by name, Professors Joseph Meshad and Catherine Franke. While the attacks on all of you by the members of Congress and by President Shafik were outrageous, unfair, false, defamatory, and deeply harmful, what distinguishes the assault on you is that you do not have tenure. While all of you are vulnerable amid this terrifying McCarthyite assault, that does put you in a particularly precarious position. I want to show a clip of the testimony given by President Shafik in Congress on the 17th of April, and then I'll ask you for your reaction. Let's roll that clip.
Who are supporting terror. And it's not just that case. Let me bring your attention to Mohamed Abdou, who was hired after the October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. He, on October 11th, posted, "Yes, I'm with Hamas and Hizballah and Islamic Jihad." He also decried false reports accusing Arabs and Muslims of decapitating the heads of children and being rapists. We know that there were decapitations of babies, of innocent Israeli citizens, of seniors, of women. There were rapes, and yet Columbia hired this individual as a professor. How did that hiring process work? Were you aware of those statements before the hiring?
I share with you your repugnance at those remarks. I completely understand that. On my watch, faculty who make remarks that cross the line in terms of anti-Semitism, there will be consequences for them.
What are the consequences
I have
in this
five
case?
cases at the moment who have either been either taken out of the classroom or dismissed.
And is he one of those?
He will never work at Columbia again.
He has been terminated?
He has been terminated. And not just terminated, but his files will show that he will never work at Columbia again.
So he's currently not employed by Columbia?
He is grading his students' papers and will never teach at Columbia again, and that will be on his permanent
How
record.
are you?
So, Mohamed, before I go to you, I want to point out that the member of Congress we just saw there, Elise Stefanik, a Republican from New York, actually misquoted you, along with that whole stream of lies about beheaded babies and rapes and so on that regular viewers of this live stream know, just atrocity propaganda and fabrications. But with reference to you, she took a few words out of a long and nuanced text which you had posted on Facebook on October the 11th. In one sentence of that post, you state, and I quote, "Yes, I am with the Muqawama, the resistance, be it Hamas and Hizballah and Islamic Jihad, but up to a point, given ultimate differences over our ethical, political commitments. That's the difference between a strategy and a tactic too." End quote. So, Mohamed, what is your reaction to how President Shafik responded to Representative Stefanik's attack on you?
Thank you, Ali. Well, clearly it was feckless, was asinine. The reality of the matter is Shafik lied on several counts. Number one, I am not terminated. My contract is coming to an end May 30th. Number two, I was not hired in October. I was hired in May of last year, while I was just wrapping up my postdoctoral fellowship, as well as visiting scholar position at Cornell University. And it is rather quite astonishing, the blasé claims with regards to when executive decisions that really undermine any kind of bureaucratic recourse, ethical adjudications by scholars who are supposed to be my peers, insofar as the evaluation of my work, of the very context of fact-checking what it is that I said, all that were surpassed, if you will. And this was an attempt to actually, as a matter of fact, torpedo any possibility for my hiring that was actively being taken by faculty as well as students, given the interdisciplinary nature of the work that I do. And it speaks to a great deal of issues, if you will, that we have in terms of values, in terms of problems, as well as solutions and actions that I think are worthy of sitting down and discussing. Subversion of First Amendment protected rights, freedom of speech, assembly, religion. As a scholar, I was hired by Columbia to teach, to be critical, to challenge, to be challenged. This is part of my learning and part of my own growth, to be actually questioned by my students. and a wide array of different fields. I'm an expert of settler colonial studies. I'm an expert in Islamic and arguably even Jewish studies, queer, gender, sexuality, abolition, and so on and so forth. I wrote my dissertation on Islam and queer Muslims. I have issues with movements that embody authoritarian tendencies, hierarchical tendencies, queerphobic, gender, sexist commitments, or the lack thereof. So these become very vital in terms of my evaluation, whether these movements are so-called Islamist, which is an Orientalist term within itself, or whether these issues exist on the left within leftist movements. To me, humbly, I say that the reason that I was also targeted is because the argument that I make in my own scholarship, there's 531 years of settler colonialism here on Turtle Island. And this becomes rather key because I work within the historical, material, symbolic, and spiritual context of 1492 globally. What happened with Muslims and Jews in Spain? What happened insofar as indigenous people over here and the ongoing genocide of indigenous people? And what Saadia Hartman refers to as afterlife to slavery projects, anti-blackness, stand-your ground laws, school-to-prison nexus, and so on and so forth. My experience thus created a chilling effect, both within the academy, in my opinion, but it also applies to a wide array of different workplaces and the general public, which says that if you choose to dissent outside the purview of the mainstream of what is manufactured as consent, you'll be punished, you'll be publicly humiliated, you'll be exposed to character assassinations, your personal information will be discussed online by power structures in the US, which it also, of course, extends to non-academic as well as governmental actors. It means that in this particular case, that the powers that be, the architects of animosity, are trying to exacerbate differences that exist between us and benefiting of the very fruits upon which conflict is reared, is given air to, such that we're not able to do what it is that we should be doing, particularly in settings such as the academy. So
I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that, about the impact that this McCarthyite campaign has had on your career, on your students, and on this, you know, the idea in general of academic freedom. What is this leading to in your view?
Thank you, Nora. Colombia and the congressional committee's behavior towards me is I would say is more than just it's a national trend, yes, but it's even beyond McCarthyism. This is Islamophobia and anti-Muslim and anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism. It involves the targeting, the punishing, the repression of students and faculty in the US and elsewhere, because you become marked, blacklisted globally in the world. And this was the idea behind 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the president of Colombia, doing what it is that she did, being attacked online by somebody like Congresswoman Stefanik through her Twitter feed. And it's a blatant violation. I've had to see, and you've shown, Maryam and other students in the encampment, many other students of mine, being suspended, being arrested, being evicted from their homes, and the destruction of their career, their lives, for speaking truth to power. But we need to pause at that for a moment, because these are our children. What Mohamed Abdou Jamal says, they are, what come from immortality, and they are the arrows that we shoot towards infinity. But this is the consequences of the absence of fact-checking in a post-alternative fact-truth Orwellian world, in which words and their meanings are very much
But I mean, Mohammed, sorry to interrupt, but isn't that the essence of a university? I mean, shouldn't a president of a university be the first one to say, I mean, when 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was confronted with those distorted at best quotes against you, and also, by the way, against the other two professors, Joseph Mashad and Catherine Franke. In the case of Joseph Mashad, the other member of Congress, I think it was Tim I forget his name now.
Oh, yeah.
Another member. Yeah, it'll come back to me in a second. But he offered, or he read a fabricated quote from that he attributed to Joseph Massad, and instead of saying, I'm sorry, sir, but what you're saying is incorrect. These faculty members did not say the things you're saying. And even if they did, they have a right to speak their minds because we hold freedom of speech and academic freedom to be sacred. She threw you all under the bus, condemned you, endorsed the fabricated quotes, and promised as we've learned, because also Professor Massad has responded to her statements, she told lies. In his case, she said that he had been removed from the Academic Review Committee, which was false, but she said that in order to appease these members of Congress. In your case, she lied that you were terminated. I mean, is this what one should expect from the president of what markets itself as one of the world's leading universities?
I do believe that this is what ostensibly, unless we put a stop to the over-policing, the criminalization of our students and faculty, Ali, that this is going to become an ongoing trend. In fact, it arguably already is, whether it's Shafi or whoever is going to come after, as a matter of fact. And the problem is that the students, the student body, faculty, the nurturing space of what it is that we're supposed to do. We're not engaged in the indoctrination of students. We allow our students, we sit down and read and engage various different perspectives from fields of expertise for them to question, because it assumes also an infantilization of them, as if they're not scrolling through genocides, on phones made from another genocide of copper and cobalt in the Congo, and so on and so forth, right? That they need to question what it is that they see with their eyes, right? And this becomes the issue in so many different respects, and why I refer to the Orwellian moment, the very dystopian moment, right? To the fact that you would bank law enforcement and they were engaged in vicious police brutality, break down the tents, throw our children's belongings in the back alley, for the kids to have to go and grab these with the help of professors because they are afraid of being targeted or being questioned or being interrogated. As if, again, funding in the US, taxpayers' money or otherwise, should not go to more and elevated issues, particularly insofar as homelessness, particularly insofar as education, particularly insofar as healthcare. But this becomes sort of the crux of the problem, right? The ability to question. Is it an American nightmare, as Malcolm had called it, or is it an American dream? And the piercing of the veneer of the brochure of what Columbia proclaims itself, and many Ivy League universities too, and non-Ivy League universities, of what they profess themselves supposedly to be. Look, you can come to Columbia and learn so many languages and engage in this multicultural liberal sort of discourse of an existence insofar as a sense of communal belonging with others from all over the world, right? Becomes subject to questioning. And they don't want that interrogated. They don't want the American dream interrogated. Let us sit down and talk about the problems of capitalism or the merits. And the same thing with Marxism and so on and so forth. Whatever it is that may be, let us have dialogue, let us have debates. But they don't want that. And it's ironically being dictated by folks, and in that hearing, that we're supporting and are supportive of, not too long ago, those who were walking down the streets and yelling, "Jews shall not replace us." This is the argument, because somebody like Shafi, on some level, one would assume that, oh, she's okay with DEI. But the folks on the committee who are against DEI, which is problematic within itself and very limited, and a lot of us have critiqued it and so on and so forth, already have issues, and they're riding sort of the bandwagon of all that.
And so, Mohamed, and by the way, Tim Walberg is the member of Congress who falsified the quote from Joseph Massad.
Right.
And I also want to just correct myself, because at the Kent State massacre, I think I said the National Guard killed 3 students. They actually killed 4. And that was on May 4th, 1970, when the National Guard was sent in to attack students protesting against the expansion of the genocidal US bombardment of Cambodia. I just wanted to correct that. But that also provides a really terrifying context, that even the mention of the National Guard in the context of student protests against a genocide really shows how unwilling the United States is to ever become something other than what it is. We just have a couple of minutes, Mohamed, but I wanted to ask you, the students who are now at the encampment at Columbia and similar protests across the country have specific demands. Columbia, like many American academic institutions, has deep ties to Israel and to Israeli universities that are fully involved in occupation, apartheid, military research, and so on, as well as investments, because remember that these Ivy League universities are, I would say, before they are educational institutions, they are real estate corporations and hedge funds. And Columbia represents that par excellence with its gentrification and expansion into historically Black neighborhoods in Upper Manhattan, displacing people involuntarily and gentrifying their neighborhoods. But it also has a massive endowment that is deeply invested in companies that aid and abet the occupation, apartheid, and colonization, and now genocide in Palestine, as well as profiting from those crimes. So, so the question is, well, can you talk more about Columbia's ties, its material, its economic, its political ties to Israel and Zionism? And can you see a world where we can actually overcome that, and where where these institutions are first and foremost what they actually proclaim to be, educational institutions where free thought and questioning and learning is actually permitted?
Thank you, Ali. That's a very important question. The question of divestment becomes quite important as a tactic and as a broader part of a larger strategy, because we're also speaking, whether it's insofar as Columbia, whether it's insofar as, well, where I came from before that, Zionist land grab Cornell, its collaboration with Technion, one of the largest land grab universities, 1 million acres of stolen land, 250 indigenous nations that were displaced. This becomes very important insofar as the context of the question of land back, of settler colonialism here. Because ultimately divestment will serve as a tactic, but then the question is, and this becomes again the crux, how can one achieve a liberated Palestine, a free Palestine, without contending with settler colonialism here, without contending with the fact that we're on Lenape territory here? And this is, I think, what needs a lot of great deal of thinking and planning and strategizing and interweaving insofar as the very story and in the very material realities, the historical realities that we're contending with equally. And these are discussions that I encourage my students, that my students are having, that Indigenous studies scholars are having, and so on and so forth. I think the most important thing right now and at this moment, and there are many, is obviously to put an end again to the genocide of our people back home, and to think through how that can be achieved in the context of here, because there's an ongoing genocide here. But to also get, again, to get people's hands, particularly those in power, off our students, off our faculty, to establish ways in which, again, overarchingly, and I don't mean to be abstract, by the way, in saying this, but this is part of the problem, because we were talking about the societal problem, and the university is a microcosm of society. It is a society of resistance, not liberation. It's colonial in terms of its formation, in terms of its structure, its hierarchical, and so on and so forth. It's meant to do what it's meant to do as an institution. And it's a site of resistance that way, not of liberation, until we build alternatives to these forms. And that becomes something that's very important when we're thinking about liberation, when we're talking about revolution, when we're talking about different ways of existing in the world, right? And the architects of power that are in place who benefit from the conflicts and strifes and disagreement that manifest within society, right? Because again, what these architects are out to do, whether it's Netanyahu, whether it's Congress, whether it's the president of Colombia, is to exacerbate the rifts between the students themselves such that we can't sit down and talk about what divestment means, given the investment of real estate corporations as Colombia in the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and the role of the mainstream media, and so on and so forth in terms of the manufacture of consent. But when we're talking about universities specifically, these are sites of education. So we should be able to educate ourselves. We should be able to organize. We should be able to build solidarity with one another, and particularly as oppressed people, not only in the context of Palestine or in the context of even Colombia. It's beautiful to see these encampments manifest in a wide array of different places. But then we need to connect what intersections exist between Palestine, Kashmir, indigenous people on Turtle Island, Black people, our Black family and kin, siblings, and what actions we need to take in terms of, as a public, to support our children getting into the streets, being a part of neighborhood educational assemblies, supporting our students and our student movements, demanding that Black, indigenous, and people of color traditions and ways of thinking and thought, because this is also at the heart of it, right, be respected in the process of demanding different ways of thinking, of living, of being, of knowing the world. So this is what becomes fundamental insofar as the hub here, and disrupting, again, what Colombia is seeking to sustain from the Board of Trustees, from administrative perspectives, and what, again, a segment of faculty that are trained with specific expertise are trying to cultivate within this environment and more broadly within other universities and institutions that are supposed to be the safest place for our children. And now they're far from it.
Yeah. We just have a minute left, Mohamed Abdou. So finally, I just wanted to ask about your advice to students who are risking arrest and suspension and eviction from student housing, who, or professors, scholars like you who are being threatened by administrations who just want to appease, members of Congress or their donors or the corporations that are that these institutions are invested in. What's your advice in terms of building this movement and supporting each other in this moment?
Thank you, Nora. I think that's a very important question. And I learn a lot from our students. I'm deeply humbled by them. They teach me everything. Without them, I would not have a vocation. And it's the most honorable thing that I could imagine doing as a knowledge keeper, as a knowledge producer. I'm originally an engineer. That's besides the point. I do what I do because I love it and because I walk with them, their journey. And the task of a scholar is not to indoctrinate, and I always tell my students, is to open the purview of the world, for students to make their own decisions, but for them to understand how we can interrelate to one another as a species. What is the role of non-human life in terms of inspiring us? What does the land have to teach us given global warming, given our Mother Earth? Our Mother Earth has her own timetable and schedule, and she does not distinguish between a freedom fighter, an indigenous land defender, as a Zionist. And that doesn't make her any less rational or reasonable than us. It's just that we have elevated ourselves to the top of the pyramid, despite the fact that our Mother Earth produces the very air that we breathe, the very seeds that fruit into vegetables and all kinds of nourishment that we necessitate for our own survival. But I always tell my students, then let our Mother Earth teach us as we walk along. Let her reveal what in Islam is known as al-Ghayb, the unknown. Let us walk with her and ask questions, as opposed to also presume, because we've gone through a lot of experiments insofar as revolutions. But I've yet to see that we listen to our Mother Earth the way that we should, and to learn from histories, because we have a great deal of anti-colonial, decolonial, abolitionist movement histories that exist and are in the making. To be humble, to be mature, and to learn to grow from one another. The Zapatistas have a wonderful saying. And they are a movement that have been a great deal of inspiration to me, and I always tell our students this. Holding each other's hands, we ask what each of us knows, and this is how we develop that revolutionary horizon together. And this becomes the question. We're on different boats and we're heading towards the same storm, and some would acknowledge that there isn't, or would say that, or proclaim that there isn't even a storm. So the students are asking the right questions. The students dream. And if anything, we need to relearn how to dream dangerously as our youth are being taken away from us, because the chickens are coming home to roost. Not only in the context, well, certainly because of everything with regards to Palestine and that has been ongoing, but also when I think of Wadi al-Fayoum, a 6-year-old in Plainsfield that was stabbed 26 times by his landlord, a white landlord that used to play with him, 26 times or 21 times, and was murdered. And his mother was stabbed as well, although alhamdulillah she survived, though I can't imagine the anguish of a mother. But what would cause a white landlord that used to play with a 6-year-old, knock on the door, stab him 21 times? So the chickens are coming home to roost. And we need to think fast about the different future that we would like our children to be raised into, regardless of the political spectrums that we lie upon. But this is why we need to get to know one another and again transcend the animosity that the architects of power, the world of the above, tries to manifest in terms of strife and disagreement between us. We need to build movements of below, and we need to remain humble, and we need to think outside the boxes that colonialism and imperialism have inculcated in the world in terms of political, organizing, economic principles for, like I said, close to 531 years. But the students lead. We are here to support them. We are here to be inspired by them. Like I said, and we started the conversation, they have electrified the faculty, and I'm very grateful that they have done so. And inshallah that will continue, and inshallah we will continue to have their back, because that is our responsibility. We're not doing them a favor. They're the ones that are doing us a favor because they're holding on to our busala, our compass, in terms of our values in Palestine, in Turtle Island, for the liberation of Africa. Africa the size of the US, Canada, Japan, Western Europe, as well as China. That's how big. So we need to think about all these dimensions.
We definitely do. And we also need the liberation of Europe from the grip of its genocidal. Of course, I'm not talking about ordinary people who are protesting across Europe, but European elites who are in the grip of a genocidal frenzy that has now lasted more than 500 years and shows no signs of abating when you look at the behavior of the European governments and their support for this genocide. But Mohamed, thank you so much for your time today. We hope to have you back, and we hope you will keep us up to date on your fight to preserve your academic freedom and your reputation and the academic freedom of everyone at Columbia as well. We wish you the best of luck, and we will be following what happens next. And as I said, I hope you'll come back again.
Yeah.
It would be an honor, Ya Ali and Nora, and thank you for making the time, and the Electronic Intifada and all the incredible work that you have been doing for many and many years. A great deal of love and respect your way. Please remember us and the students in particular in your prayers, and we hold the people of Gaza, Abubaker very close to us, his sweetness, his gentleness, all our siblings everywhere in the world, the dispossessed, the wretched of the earth. So inshallah, may this be the year that Palestine sets us all free, bi'idhnillah. Yes. If we listen to her, if we really listen to her in full. So
Ameen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Abdou. And you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, Mohamed Abdou is courageous. I mean, if to be attacked like that in Congress by your own university president, and to be willing to speak out and to be willing to continue to stand by your convictions and beliefs, is an example for all of us. And of course, we will continue to follow what happens with Professor Abdou and with all of this horrific crackdown at Columbia, whose goal, let's remember, is to silence, is to make the genocide in Gaza and the complicity of institutions like Columbia and the United States government invisible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They want to stop these uprisings because they don't like the attention that it's giving to Gaza. So yeah, incredible. And obviously we'll be continuing to talk about this. But let's bring on Jon. Hello, Jon.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, Jon.
I got my sticker for Abubaker.
But you know, we have a whole set of stickers that you know, we print a sticker every year, which we do with the wonderful Alliance Graphics in Berkeley, California.
Great.
And the profits from our sticker, all their profits, as I understand, go to the Middle East Children's Alliance, another wonderful organization. And we send those stickers out each year to people who've given a donation to the Electronic Intifada, and some people have collected them all over the years. Abubaker is getting I'm gonna actually frame the whole set for him.
He deserves it all.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm gonna do.
I can't wait. We can give it to him ourselves, having a coffee on the beach in liberated Gaza.
That's the goal.
That's right. Well, Jon, you're going to take a look at videos from the resistance in Gaza and the West Bank over the last week, as well as a series of operation by Hizballah as the war passes 200 days.
200 days.
It's impossible to comprehend.
Yeah. Well, they're still fighting. 200 days on. No signs of abating at all. The news report that Nora did at the beginning captured a lot of the things that I always want to say before breaking down these resistance videos, is that we're covering the ground invasion day by day, hour by hour. But the air war against the people of Gaza continues consistently, no matter how the ground operation is going. They're killing 100 people a day from the air. And it's brutal. The scenes that were found at Shifa Hospital of the mass graves, now we're seeing mass graves at Nasser Hospital. And it's important to remember that both of these operations were what the IDF said were the gold standard of urban warfare. They described the attack on Nasser and Shifa hospitals as the example of the type of raids that they were going to carry out in this period from the buffer zone into Gaza. So even though you've heard that ground troops have, for the most part, left Gaza, the Israelis still intend to raid regularly into Gaza, and Shifa and Nasser hospitals are examples of that, but also in Beit Hanun. So let's look at video number 1 here tomorrow. This is Beit Hanun, where the Israelis went in last week on a focused raid, as they called it. They attacked the internally displaced people's camp in a UN school and arrested everybody over the age of 14. They operated on the ground for more than a week. Again, we've edited out the key parts of these scenes, but we're looking through a sniper scope here at Israeli forces that believe they're sheltered here to the east of Beit Hanun. We're seeing one of more than 40 Al-Ghul sniper rifle attacks. We've edited out the scenes here. So if YouTube's watching, we've edited out all of the scenes. People can use their imagination, but this is a sniper hit that the Israelis admitted severely wounded a Shaldag special forces officer, which is something, again, we've seen with these sniper attacks throughout the war, that Qassam, this is a Qassam attack, Qassam is able to track these units and are picking not the regular grunt soldiers, But here, during the invasion of Beit Hanun, they're able, according to Israeli confirmation, to target a Shaldag Special Forces officer. And this is a Special Forces soldier who's Air Force reconnaissance, and they're feted within the military as being able to move behind enemy lines. And here we see the Qassam brigades are able to target them. And not just any soldier, but to pick these soldiers. And just to note, during this operation in Beit Hanun, the Israelis also released information where they bragged about that through the 6 months of this ground war, that they have stolen $7.6 million from homes of people in Gaza, and they said the money was forfeited to the Bank of Israel. So, of all of the other things that we've covered on this show, Israel wanted to add stealing money from people's homes to the tune of $7.6 million. Have been taken throughout the course of this battle. So maybe we could go to number 2 here tomorrow. That was the first one in Beit Hanun. This is now in the middle camps area. We're seeing a D9 armored bulldozer here with the red triangle over top of it, being hit by a Yasin 105 strike that appears to be from a tunnel-fed position, but we can watch when this comes back around. This video, you can see the D9 armored bulldozer is bulldozing greenhouses. So this is the operation that the Israelis needed to wrap up in the middle camps, where they killed thousands of people during these operations. And these are the last days of the operations. And just before leaving, they decided that a place that is undergoing a deep famine that will take years to recover from if the war were to end today, Israel's intended target here is to destroy greenhouses. And that was a direct hit on the cockpit of a D9 armored bulldozer made by Caterpillar in the United States. For people working on boycott, divestment, and sanctions stuff, you can see this this vehicle operating in the field. This was part of the operations in the middle camps, where Israelis have been moving to expand the buffer zone along Netzarim corridor, which is what I've talked about a number of times on this show, that the Israelis are splitting the north and the south of the Gaza Strip with a massive buffer zone to divide the territory. And while that operation is going on, they decided that these few greenhouses here on the edge of Deir al-Balah needed to be destroyed. So just so people get a sense of the idea of what the Israeli army is doing, rather than dismantling Hamas or Qassam or militant infrastructure, they're out here demolishing greenhouses during a famine. So let's go to number 3 tomorrow. This is Saraya al-Quds, Islamic Jihad. They're showing us a video here of their units putting together rocket artillery, 107 millimeter rocket artillery. These are the Palestinian resistance version of the tank shells. And the fighters are being shown here of Saraya al-Quds putting together the rockets. Now, Saraya al-Quds has a rocket program that has carried on parallel to Qassam's rocket program, and I brought some numbers here so people could understand the trajectory of the rocket program that began at the beginning of the Second Intifada, when Adnan al-Ghul of the Qassam Brigade set about making a rocket program that could reach out from the territory that they were occupied in and reach Israel. In 2001, there was 4 rockets fired. 2002, there was 35. 2003, 155. 2004, 281. So you can see the development of the rocket program happening. 2005, the Israelis leave Gaza and the weapons industry in the Gaza Strip is able to really take hold. 2006, they fire 950 rockets, so 5 times as many as the year before the Israelis left. By 2008, it's 2,000 rockets. And then in 2014, during the 2014 war, Palestinians were able to fire 4,500 rockets. Now, October 7th operation began, the morning of October 7th, began by Qassam and Surah al-Quds firing 5,000 rockets within minutes. So you can see the development of this rocket program. This is Surah al-Quds now showing us their 𝐬𝐿ahm rockets. They made their own 𝐬𝐿ahm rockets parallel to the 𝐬𝐿ahm weapons program. And this is Islamic Jihad fighters showing us these rockets being assembled. You can see that they're written on there. It says beside the Palestinian flag, they're made in Palestine on those stickers. These are Palestinian made weapons that we're always showing here on this program, because the development of the rocket program and the weapons industry, there you see made in Palestine. The development of the weapons program is the reason why Israel has been unable to defeat, one of the reasons why Israel has been unable to defeat the Palestinian resistance or the Palestinian people in general in this 7 months of genocide. So we're watching the rockets being put together here by Surah al-Quds, the various different types of rockets they're using. Now we're seeing their 116 millimeter, which is similar to the 107 that they just showed before. But they have a whole variety of rockets. And here we see the fighters installing buried launchers, digging them out. We're watching them physically dig out the launchers from the ground. This is what we're watching is a joint operation here with the DFLP, the National Resistance Brigades of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So we're seeing, again, groups working together. And these buried launchers that you see, the fighter is now, we're watching him insert the rocket into the launcher. These buried launchers exist above ground where they can be dug out like we're watching here. And now we're going to watch the rockets be fired. But they also have rocket positions that are connected to tunnels and that could be resupplied through the tunnel apparatus. And as we know, Israel has been unable to stop this rocket fire throughout, even when there's ground invasions, even when there's troops on the ground in the areas, in the particular regions. Those regions are still able to fire rockets. And of course, the minute the Israelis leave, as they did in Khan Yunis a couple weeks ago after a devastating 𝐬𝐿ahm raid, rockets were fired by resistance groups immediately. And so what we're seeing here is Surah al-Quds still able, they still have this capacity. Even the smaller groups still have this weapons capacity. The other factions have been producing videos like this as well of their rocket fire. And so when Israel is telling you that they're dismantling these particular battalions throughout Gaza and that they have to go into Rafah to dismantle the last of the battalions, it has no bearing in reality. As Abu Ubaidah said the other day, it's just gaslighting you to believe that an invasion of Rafah will somehow change this situation, because we're watching Islamic Jihad here in Gaza City, which has been invaded multiple times, required 4 divisions just to enter the city the first time, and then multiple raids on these cities, and they're still unable to stop the rocket fire. It's interesting here that we're seeing them set up makeshift rocket launchers. These weapons, these 105 millimeter shells, are normally fired out of tube launchers. The Chinese Type 63 tube launchers, multiple rocket launcher. You can see it in that photo in the back there behind the Islamic Jihad fighter. That's his armband that says Islamic Jihad. You can see there, they're showing you that's what the multiple launcher looks like. But the resistance factions have been able to make makeshift launchers to launch these devices, which allows them to not be tracked, and is one of the reasons why the rocket program has been successful after still 7 months on of carrying out rocket strikes. More than 10,000 rockets have been fired on Israel, which is more than double the amount that happened in either the 2006 war or the 2014 war. So these groups are able to still carry out these operations. And Abu Ubaidah gave a speech yesterday on the anniversary of on the 200-day anniversary, 200-day marking. Anniversary is probably not the right word, but he made some interesting points that I just want to bring to people. He reminded people that that this operation began on October 7th. with the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades dismantling the Gaza division, destroying the Gaza division, he says, in under an hour. I actually think that that's a long estimate of how long it took them. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades actually had overrun the Gaza division within 25 minutes of the 6:30 a.m. operation. But he says the images that Nora described so well in the introduction news report of this show, Abu Ubaidah says that these are not images of victory. These are images of a barbaric nature of an occupation on display. He said that the IDF is trapped in the sands of Gaza with no goal, no horizon, no image of victory, no freedom of their captives, only wanton destruction, random, indiscriminate destruction, which he acknowledged, something that we've acknowledged on this show many times. It's a tactic that just doesn't work. There's now more fighters in Gaza. There's more children who have witnessed this brutality, who will grow up to want to get revenge and to want to liberate their territory. Abu Ubaidah pointed out that every time Israel gets into a strategic bind, they cry out for help to their Western masters, which he said just proves that they're an imposition on the region, that they're part of Western designs. And he pointed out correctly that all of this is to protect Netanyahu's office, because Netanyahu's trying to extend this war to remain in office. He talked about, Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson for the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades, he talked about the killing of international aid workers and the killing of local volunteers as well, which we've seen. He said these are the actions of a defeated army with an inferiority complex. He said these massacres are something any coward can achieve. These massacres, they're not military. They're not military objectives in any way. And any coward could carry out these massacres. He also reiterated the position of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 brigades on the ceasefire and prisoner exchange proposals, and he reiterated their position that has been consistent since the beginning, which is a comprehensive ceasefire, the withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza, the return of people to the displaced people to their homes, as we know, most of which are destroyed at this point by Israel's wanton destruction. And he wants, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is clear that the reconstruction begins immediately. The siege ends. And as you see in this screenshot here, he also saluted the heroes in the West Bank, and he lists the cities in the West Bank, the cities and their refugee camps. He lists the cities, but we know Tulkarm, it's Nur Sham's refugee camp, and Tulkarm refugee camp are both fighting. In Jenin, he mentions Jenin, and Jenin, the refugee camp, is also fighting. In Nablus, we know there's fighting in Balata refugee camp in Nablus. There's fighting in Tubas, resistance in the camps around Tubas, Ramallah, Kalkilia, Jericho, Bethlehem, Dahesha camp in Bethlehem is fighting. And he mentions Halil, Hebron in the south of the West Bank. He also saluted the Jordanians who are on the streets protesting every day. And he pointed out the Iranian missile attack on Israel had set new rules of the game for the Middle East. Which I think is an accurate point. So he listed those heroic. He called them the heroic fighters of the West Bank. Let's take a look at those operations in the West Bank tomorrow. This is number 4 here. This is the Saraya al-Quds Tulkarm brigade. This is a mixtape that they put out a couple weeks ago showing some of their operations. The development of the media arm of the resistance in the West Bank is something that we've been watching week after week improve. Previously, the resistance in the West Bank didn't have this kind of video production showing us everything in detail like this, but they're really starting to add that Gaza dimension to their video work, to their resistance program in the West Bank as well. So Nora talked about the invasion of Nur Sham's camp. It's one of 75 brigade level invasions that the Israelis have carried out since October 7th. It was a 54-hour operation. Tamara wrote a great piece on Electronic Intifada that Nora cited that people should check out about the Nur Shams invasion. But just to reiterate some of the things that Tamara pointed out, 14 killed, 3 of them were children, 25 injured. The IDF did what they always do, take homes, civilian homes, and use them as bases and sniper positions. They sealed off the camp. They didn't allow medics into the camp. They raided the hospital and arrested medical workers. They destroyed power, telecommunications, the water, the sewage. All of this was to hunt for Mohamed Jabir Abu Shuja, who is the Tulkarm Brigade commander, who's based in Nur Shams refugee camp. Maybe we can go to number 5 tomorrow, because this is the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades. They released this video during the operation. It says that the Al-Aqsa, they say through this radio that we're looking at, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade's Youth and Revenge and Liberation Wing. Our magazines are still full. Our rifles are well. Whoever wants to walk the path of thorns will walk under the shower of bullets. And they were, the resistance was fierce in Nur Shams. We're watching video from the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades here. The IDF admitted to 9 casualties in this operation, including a Special Forces soldier from their Lotar unit and a deputy commander in the border police unit. And as Tamara reported, at least 14 people were killed in this operation, which takes the number of killed in the West Bank to almost 500 since October 7th. And as we've said numerous times, at any other time, what was happening in the West Bank would be called an intifada, because it surely is. So this operation was, again, to try to capture Abu Shuja. If we look at this next image here, there was some word that he was assassinated, but he showed up after the general strike. The West Bank had a general strike in honor of the fight in Nur Shams, and there was some talk for the 2 days of the invasion that they had killed the commander, and that their operation was successful. And here he is showing up at the martyr's funeral the next day, alive and well. And so, again, more lies about the success of these operations and more ability for the Palestinian resistance to show the truth of these operations through their video work. So that was an important story in the West Bank that I wanted to bring you. We haven't seen as much video out of the operation. The telecommunications were dropped in the camp, and it can take sometimes a little more time for the videos to be produced from the West Bank operations. But there he is, the target of that raid that destroyed, again, it's the Dahiya doctrine, as Tamara pointed out. Instead of attacking the resistance, you attack the civil society, you attack their water, power, sewage, and you fail to achieve your military goals while doing so. So we also got an operation from Qalqilia, which Abu Ubaidah mentioned as well, number 6 here, Tamara. You can see in Qalqilia, this operation harkens back to the preparation video that we saw from the Khan Yunis operation. This is the TLP, the troop leading procedures before the operation, planning out an ambush with a booby-trapped vehicle, and they're showing us here the fighters preparing that. Fighters wearing gloves in this case is interesting. I think it's pointing to the fact that the resistance in the West Bank needs to have more forensic care because of the presence of the Israelis on the ground in a way that's not in Gaza. We're looking at 3 cameras here. 1 camera positioned outside of the booby-trapped car, 1 positioned inside the booby-trapped car, and then the bottom, you see the fighter opening fire, beginning the ambush. And begins the ambush by firing on Israeli military position, military bus entering the settlement. And you can see the bus stopping there and the troops. So part of the detail of this operation is to plan the escape for the fighter, for the shooter, and to escape in a way that lures the Israeli forces. So here we see the first squad showing up. and walking by the booby-trapped car. The second force showing up there. You see there's the third one showing up and moving towards the booby-trapped car to chase the fighter. You see the soldiers there notice that the car is ambushed, and now we're seeing it detonated from 3 cameras remotely. So we're seeing complex resistance operations. The IDF admitted 2 wounded in this operation. They keep saying everybody's severely wounded. That sniper shot that we saw at the beginning, they said he was severely wounded, which then they later count them as dead. But again, Israel's been hiding their casualties this whole time in order to build up the morale or to protect the morale of their forces. Something that Nasrallah points out all the time, that Hizballah is proud of their fighters and they release their names all the time. The Israelis are covering up their casualties. So detailed operation in Qalqilia. This operation led to a 60-hour raid in Jayus looking for the fighters. The Israelis dropped leaflets demanding that people turn over the fighter or that they would sack the camp. And so we see these types of operations really developing in the West Bank. So this is effectively an ambush with a car bomb operation. And you see the 4 different IDF squads joining in into this chase, and they were unsuccessful in finding, through their 60-hour raid, the operators who carried out that operation. So let's go to number 7, Tamara. This is this is the people are calling this the second flag ambush. This is an Israeli soldier who's in a settlement in the West Bank. He drives by in his car apparently with his wife. He sees a Palestinian flag flying in a field randomly. And he decides to pull over his car because he can't continents having a Palestinian flag. Israeli soldiers can't see a Palestinian flag. They have to attack it. So he decides to get out of his car, and you can watch on this video, we're watching him march with purpose through a field. He's acting real strong with his arms out to his side, chest puffed up, and he's going to kick over this Palestinian flag. And when he kicks it, the flag explodes. We've, if YouTube is watching, we have blurred with great care, blurred out the scene, but he kicks the flag and triggers the booby trap. Now, the reason people are calling this the flag ambush number 2 is because there was a famous flag ambush that happened in 2008. We'll watch him do this one more time. The way he walks with purpose up to this is just a remarkable part of this video. And he kicks it instead of picks it up and puts it down. He kicks it and detonates the explosive on himself. He's, again, severely wounded, according to the Israelis. He's an IDF soldier who's just on leave in his West Bank settlement. So let's go to the next one here, Tamara, because we can see the original flag ambush here on the left. This was from 2018. This was just before the March of Return. This is on the border fence with Gaza. The Palestinians hung up on the border fence a Palestinian flag, and the Israeli army sent their bomb squad here. You can see there's 4 soldiers from the bomb squad who could not allow there to be a Palestinian flag flying on the inner edge of the ghetto of Gaza. And so Israel sent their bomb squad to take down that flag. That was in February of 2018. And the flagpole is a breaching charge. So that flagpole there that he's holding is an explosive charge. He believes that they believe that the ambush was going to be removing the flag, but it wasn't. So they carry the flag over. He brings it right back to his group. They all look at the flag, and the flag explodes. And interestingly, the breaching charge that's used in that flagpole was the breaching charge built in Gaza that was used on October 7th to breach the fence on October 7th and to begin the operation on October 7th. So those are called the flag ambushes in Palestine, and that was a remarkable event that I wanted to bring to you from the West Bank. So that's the resistance news from the West Bank and Gaza. But we have a bunch of news this week from Lebanon. Hizballah carried out a number of qualitative military operations this week. This is part of their overall daily. Hizballah carries out between 8 and 15 operations every single day and have since October the 8th when they joined this battle. They've carried out, according to Hizballah, 1,637 operations. That's to go along with Yemen's 118 operations and Iraq's 243 operations. So let's look at the video from Arab al-Aramshi. This is a border town that's evacuated. This border town has been evacuated like all of the Israeli border towns in the north and in the south as well. This is the first time that Israel's had buffer zones inside its own territory. They haven't been able to take back this territory because of Hizballah attacks on the border. So this is pointing out that the IDF is using this community center right in the middle of a civilian neighborhood. If this was in Gaza, the Israelis would make a huge deal and call this a kindergarten, because surely this community center is a daycare as well. But we can see here Hizballah is pointing out the military vehicles out front. And this is a newly established IDF reconnaissance base. And we're watching here an al-Mas anti-tank missile that we've talked about on the program before that was captured in 2006 during the July war, taken to Iran and reverse engineered, and now is in the hands of resistance fighters of Hizballah and is able to, as we see here, target this makeshift Israeli base, which is interesting on a number of levels. First of all, this is a midday strike. It's in the middle of the day, broad daylight. And it's a newly established base. This base was just established by the IDF. It's one thing to have intelligence, to have an intelligence bank that you've collected, that Hizballah's collected for the last decade, where they know where particular installations are because of years of monitoring. But what we're seeing here is a new base. This is a new base that Hizballah demonstrates that they're able to have real-time human and signals intelligence that demonstrates their ability to find these targets in real time. This is not based on a bank of research that they've had over the years. So this strike was an al-Mas, according to the Israelis, 2 al-Mas anti-tank missiles. The Israelis didn't say they were al-Mas, but we know they are from that visual. And this was a mass casualty event for the IDF. Again, they said 14 wounded at the hospital. They said 18 were taken into the hospital. We know this community is evacuated and is a military base, so there's not civilians in the base. Again, unclear why the Israelis are lying even in detail when we have hospital reports of the number of casualties. So 14 or 18, 6 severely injured, 1 dead company commander that the Israelis 2 days later said was killed. In this attack, the Israeli media noted that no air defense alarms were sounded. And we've watched over the last months Hizballah taking out these surveillance towers and radar stations. We'll see more of them coming up. But this was a fiberglass drone attack. It has low heat signature. It defeated their radar, and the al-Mas anti-tank weapon travels below the radar, so it can't be seen. Let's look at number 6 here, Tamara, because you can see this is Hizballah showing the drone in flight. We saw this footage last week with the audio. When the next time it goes around, we'll leave the audio in so you can hear it. So that's the Abubaker Abed drone. Again, Hizballah hasn't said what kind of munition that is, but we can see it's an Abubaker by the airframe of that. It's a fiberglass weapon again, so it's defeating the the radar heat signatures. Do you want to show the next one tomorrow, because we can watch it now? This is footage of it landing on the military base here. With the audio in, a direct strike. So not only is their intelligence precise, but their striking is precise, and we're seeing them able to hit these targets in a way that is a qualitative upgrade. And the lack of air defense signals going off, the air raid sirens, is a very interesting development, and it's something that we've been noticing for the last week or two in many of these strikes from Lebanon, that there's no air raid siren being sounded. So Israel's air defense array is not being used. On this attack here at the base at Arab al-Ramshi, the IDF actually put out notifications of alarms after the strike happened. So almost worse than having no alarms to have them after the strike. Let's look at number 11 tomorrow. This is another qualitative upgrade. We're watching a Burkan heavy rocket be fired in Sheba Farms and hitting an Israeli barracks, the Branit barracks in Sheba Farms, the 91st Division barracks. And we're seeing this is Burkan heavy rocket. The first time we've seen these throughout the war, but this war is the first time that we've seen this weapon be used. It's a heavy rocket which can carry a warhead up to 150 kilograms. We don't know which each one, depending on the distance, they change the warhead size, but you can clearly see direct hit on that Israeli base with the Burkan heavy rocket. And Hezbollah is able to produce these videos and show them within a day of these operations. And it's because of these operations that the Israelis are not back in their villages in the north, and Israel has no plan at this point for what their plan is for moving Hezbollah off the border. Of course, they could take this opportunity to negotiate a diplomatic solution, to have a ceasefire and a prisoner exchange. Hezbollah said that their battle is tied to the battle in Gaza, as Ansar Allah has said about their battle in the Red Sea, that if there is a ceasefire and aid into Gaza, both those groups would stop their attacks, that their attacks are part of that war. But Israel hasn't shown any indication that they're even interested in bringing back their people. And so these wars continue. Let's go to number 12 tomorrow. This is an Al-Mas 3 attack. This is the first time that we've seen an Al-Mas 3. This is the longest range Al-Mas anti-tank guided missile. This is a top attack guided missile, which means that it can be fired and then controlled from a separate location. It can be fired on the ground and be directed upwards and then downwards, like we see here, traveling downwards toward a mobile radar station. So this is a mobile radar station, missile and drone detection radar station that the Israelis have, that's tied into their Iron Dome air defense system. And their David Sling anti-ballistic missile system. So it's an artillery detection radar, which is one of the reasons why you might that might explain why your rocket alarms are not going off when these types of radars are being hit. And we've seen this is at the Mount Meron air traffic control base and surveillance base, which is, again, something we've covered on these resistance reports before, because it was a previous target many times throughout this war. It's one of the more than 1,400 IDF sites that have been hit by Hezbollah, according to them. And it's one of this radar station is an important radar. It's not just any radar. These are not. There's only finite number of these Iron Dome missile defense systems. These types of sophisticated radars. There's not just ones in the back room that they pull out when these are destroyed. Destroying these platforms is significant, and of course. I think it goes without saying that you can make an Ababil fiberglass drone a lot faster than you can make one of these air defense radar systems. And so let's look at number 13 tomorrow. This is another attack. This is a Coronet anti-tank missile attack. And again, I want to just say all of these videos are from the since you saw me last. All the videos I'm showing are still all from this last week. This is an signals intelligence base in Sheba Farms up on a hilltop. And again, a direct hit by a Ков𝐼 anti-tank missile, which the Iranians make a copy of, and Hezbollah has many of them, and we've seen them be used throughout the war. This is the first time they've given us a below view of the shooter, but you can see track the missile in there and direct hit. They have been very precise with these Ков𝐼 missiles. And so these videos, these piles of videos that Hezbollah produces each week, let's look at number 14 tomorrow, because the Israelis made a big deal about this video. They said that they had a training exercise in the Galilee, a Galilee exercise that they said was to prepare for all scenarios in the Galilee, which basically means Hezbollah invasion of the Galilee. This is an IDF, Israeli Air Force, and their search and rescue operations preparedness. And this is the video that Israel put out. The only thing in the video is them doing medevacs of their injured soldiers to practice medevacs of their injured soldiers, and then a bunch of generals, a bunch of old men standing around talking. The video goes on for 2.5 minutes of them just all standing around talking. And so this is this major training exercise that took place in the north. They announced it days in advance that it was going to happen. And I followed it to see what kind of exercises they were going to do. And just interestingly, the only thing that they show is their medevacs, which I think when you compare to the resistance videos is just remarkable. Let's go to number 15 tomorrow. I just wanted to throw that in there about what the Israelis are doing. They don't just show shooting at school walls in Gaza. They also show the medevac of their soldiers in preparation for a battle with Hezbollah. This is in Metula. This is in another abandoned Israeli community in the north that has been used as a military base. This is a direct coordinate strike on a troop position inside a long evacuated settlement. So we see that strike hitting there. And number 16 tomorrow is also in Metula. This is a coordinate anti-tank missile strike on you can see dismounted soldiers there in the circle. And that dismounted soldier is going to get into his Humvee. We see the coordinate Iranian version of the coordinate there. Firing on them. And again, another direct hit in using civilian infrastructure as a shield, a military base. We can see the Humvee up the armored vehicle being hit directly in that shot for people that are watching it. Hezbollah rewinds it for us in case we missed it the first time. A direct hit on that vehicle that they're showing. And you can see after in this footage, the Humvee rolling down into the bush. No casualties claimed on that incident, but you can see the way that vehicle drifts into the bush, that there are clearly casualties in that operation as well. And number 17 here, this is one of 51 targetings by Hezbollah of Israeli air assets. This is the Hermes 450 drone. We reported 2 weeks ago that Hezbollah downed the same series drone 900, Hermes 900. This is a $2 million drone. It's a reconnaissance and combat drone, so it's part of their signals intelligence warfare. It's carrying out assassinations and airstrikes. It's an armed weapon. It's $2 million. This is the second one in about 3 weeks that we've seen of a Hermes 450 downed. We also saw the Hermes 900 downed a couple weeks ago. This is Hezbollah showing us. They're not showing us the missile that's used for the strike. They edited that part out. But as I covered on a previous show, it's apparent that they're using these what are called Item 358. They're a loitering drone that acts like a cruise missile that the Ansar Allah movement has clearly been using to down MQ-9 Reaper drones over Yemen. And this is Hezbollah using this weapon to now down the third flagship Israeli drone over Lebanese territory, which effectively means that this weapon is an anti-access area denial weapon, which means that the Israelis are going to have to adjust the way that they carry out their war, because these platforms that are crucial to their war plans, giving real-time surveillance, they're being downed. And it's obvious that the capacity to do this is clearly within the hands of the resistance at this point, and it structurally changes the way that the Israelis have to fight this war. This is Hezbollah just giving the specs on this drone and showing the way that it's used for getting reconnaissance information about the battlefield, distributing it, and then distributing it to the fighters of the Israelis, so they constantly know. And these are part of Hezbollah's response to the assassinations that Israel has carried out against their Radwan special forces units that are on the border. The attack at Arab al-Aramshi was an attack on a reconnaissance base that's part of the assassinations. These drones are what carry out the assassinations. And so these are Hezbollah's direct response to Israeli operations. And they're able to communicate through the resistance, through their operations. And you can watch we're watching, for the listeners, we're watching this Hermes drone spiraling down to the ground. So I wanted to bring you those videos from Lebanon as well, because the battle in the north for Israel has really deepened as they have pulled their forces mostly out of Gaza and are carrying out artillery and air war on Gaza. There's still a massive situation that the Israelis have to handle on the northern front, and they show no signs. They show signs of losing that war as well in the north. So I just wanted to bring you all of that in the resistance report for this week: West Bank, Gaza, and Lebanon.
Wow. Thank you, as always, Jon, for that, as I say, meticulous curation of the videos that, they don't show on CNN or MSNBC or talk about on NPR or even lefty media. So we're always so proud to have you present that.
Yeah, it was tremendous. And, I admit, I watched that. And for those, this is the first time we see it. We watch this with you for the first time. I think Tamara gets something of a preview because she and Jon work together in preparing the videos. And of course, in the meetings, when we're planning our live stream, we, Jon gives us a sort of a summary of what he's going to talk about. And we might share some. I'm giving a little background here for a reason, because what I want to say is that I have to go back and watch it again. I take notes as I'm watching, but then I go back and watch it again after the live stream, and I get even more out of it. So I just want to encourage people to do that, because it's such dense information and really fantastic analysis, Jon. So thank you for that.
Thanks, guys.
And some of the things I wrote, I wrote down a lot of things. I won't share them all, but a couple of things that really struck me is with respect to the flag ambush. You called them flag ambushes. Was it last week that you talked about how the Israelis used quadcopters with loudspeakers playing the sounds of women and children crying,
that was
in order to lure Palestinians out of relatively safe places. So the Israelis are using the sounds of children crying because they know that Palestinians are going to run towards that in order to try to render assistance, even at the risk of their own lives. And the Israelis are exploiting that in order to ambush and murder these Palestinians. Whereas the Palestinians so you could say the Israelis understand Palestinian psychology to that extent. Not very much, but they do understand. Yeah, Palestinians see other Palestinians in need, they run towards them to help them. The Palestinians understand the Israeli psychology, that they just hate anything Palestinian so much, even a flag, that they have to run towards it to destroy it. And that contrast just came into my mind. And the other thing, once again, is when you were showing the sophisticated, complex operation in the West Bank and the Hizballah operation, where they were able to precisely identify and target a newly established Israeli military facility, again shows the difference between real intelligence and so-called artificial intelligence. And again, thinking back to our discussion last week and the week before with Paul Bigger and Anthony Lowenstein. So anyway, I just wanted to share those observations.
And Hezbollah is not even like Hezbollah. These are empty communities. If it was Israel, they would be destroying the empty communities. Hezbollah is hitting military targets in those communities that the Israelis are using. They're not sending rocket fire with the goal of erasing all of the settlements. I mean, Iran did the same thing. Iran's attacks were on military installations. They weren't on downtown Tel Aviv. And this idea that Israel gets to say that all their civilian casualties are because war is messy, it's just a lie. And we can see that, yeah, exactly what you said, real intelligence versus, where's daddy artificial intelligence suggesting who might be a fighter and where they might be. Because the Israelis have no intelligence on the ground in these areas. They're even in Nur Shams. They go into the camp and they're unable to find the fighters, even though there's thousands of Palestinians there. Nobody's helping them. And so
they just wreck the place.
So they just wreck the place. They just destroy wanton destruction everywhere and kill civilians.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well that it's important to remember that since 7th of October, the 7th of October and the 8th of October, respectively, the Israeli frontier settlements around the Gaza Strip and, large swathes of the Israeli settlements in the north, as John mentioned, are still completely empty. So they've been forcibly emptied by resistance.
Actually, Asa, that reminds me. I just want to show something. I read an article in Haaretz today. I'm going to drop this here for Tamara, if you could put this up. This is an article in Haaretz today about Kibbutz Be'eri, which we've talked about many, many times. Just if you could just put my tweet up, please, Tamara. Sorry, I wasn't clear about that. Kibbutz Be'eri, which is where Yasmin Porat was, who spoke about how the Israeli army killed so many people. Kibbutz Be'eri, where the authorities there absolutely denied the claims of beheaded babies and rapes. But if you just click into the text, the one on the right, Tamara, if you can show that, it just, again, there's this very casual passing mention in this Haaretz story about how destroyed Kibbutz Be'eri is, and there's a quote from one of the residents who says the place looks bad both because of what the neighbors, that's a reference to Gaza, did to us, and because of what the army did there.
Right.
And I think if you go to the first picture, Tamara, you see, again, they say that in the caption when they show this really destroyed house, that the army did so much of this. But the point of the article, Asa, again, is it talks about how very few people have gone back to Kibbutz Be'eri, and they may never go back.
Exactly. And this is I'm working on a long article about this at the moment, and, our viewers will be able to hopefully see it in due course. But this is, as you pointed out on Twitter earlier, like this is just yet another example of how this kind of the mass Hannibal, the so-called friendly fire by the Israeli military on its own communities, on its own civilians, is a kind of open secret within Israel, and it's a kind of perplexing puzzle because you're allowed to talk about it inside the settler society, the Israeli settler society, to an extent within Hebrew, and you get these passing references like that, right, in the English language versions of these Israeli publications. But obviously, when we've done it, when we have talked about the Hannibal Directive, when we've reported accurately on this sort of suicidal national policy of the Israeli military to bomb its own civilian and military targets to prevent live captures, and when other independent outlets have done it as well, they get attacked, criticized, and smeared. As we've talked about in the past. But I think it's I think that with this, there's still a lot that has yet to be revealed about the 7th of October.
Yeah. And I wanted to, if I may, I have a whole list of things I want to ask Jon, but maybe before we come back to me, someone else, if you, I don't know if you had something, Nora.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to talk about the rumblings of a possible ground invasion into Rafah, which is something that the Israelis have been threatening for months. The Israeli media is, starting to talk about tanks amassing at the boundary, but we can go to that after you.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to ask Jon about this report in the Times of Israel today, which says that the Israeli army is readying to deploy 2 reserve brigades for missions in the Gaza Strip as the military appeared to move ahead with plans for an offensive in Rafah. And they talk about in the article a plan, because as we know, the United States, the main sponsor of this genocide, is, feigning concern for people at Rafah and saying, oh, well, we wouldn't, support an attack on Rafah unless Israel comes up with a plan to evacuate the 1 million+ people there. And what this Times of Israel article says, which is very worrying, is they say that Israel has obtained 40,000 tents that they're placing near Khan Yunis. And I think, Tamara, there's even a satellite image of that has come out recently of a tent encampment that went up. And as we know that, 40,000 tents, even if they could house the number of people, wouldn't account for the water supply, the sanitation, the food. Israel is still blocking humanitarian aid. So that this would at best be, and this would at best be a fig leaf of a humanitarian, so-called humanitarian effort to evacuation to lay the ground for an attack on Rafah. So, Jon, what do you make of this? What do you think Israel could achieve by going into Rafah, and what do you think that would look like? I know I'm asking you a lot, but as viewers know, your predictions have tended to be, fairly on the nose. So what do you say about this? Well, yes, exactly. Yeah.
There's about 20% off there, bud.
I think that the invasion of Rafah we will see developing for weeks and weeks. The number of troops that they need, the Israelis need, will be visible, I think, as a buildup. I think the Rafah invasion has a lot of aspects that the other areas of Gaza didn't have, that are logistical problems for a military. The border with Egypt is a situation that they don't have anywhere else in Gaza during their invasions. Rafah is the widest.
This why? Sorry to interrupt, but just to add to the question, is this why the U.S. is so intent on this? Is it part of why they're so intent on this jetty to supposedly bring? Is it? How does it connect to Rafah in your mind?
I mean, the jetty is still unclear. Those soldiers are ready to arrive at any day now, and that seems like a whole separate situation. The thing about Rafah is that that's the widest area of the Gaza Strip. It's the longest supply line that the Israelis would need to have, and it's a deep enough position that they can get cut off their troops could get cut off from resupply in Rafah, which is something we even saw in Khan Yunis, which isn't as wide, but has similar attributes. Remember back in earlier in the year, the Israelis showed us that they needed to resupply by airdrop to their troops in Khan Yunis. Rafah is even more significant than that. There's also population densities on the western edge of Rafah that there isn't in Khan Yunis, and isn't in the same way in the north. So the invasion of Rafah and the idea that they're tying that Netanyahu doesn't want to go into Rafah right now. He's delaying this because the longer he delays, the more he survives in power. But I think that the Rafah invasion, the Americans said that they said it was a red line. They didn't just say they had to have a good plan. They said they were totally against the Rafah invasion, which I don't know, seemed to be an interesting position. Of course,
well, they're against it until they're for it,
right?
And none of
they're saying now it's inevitable. So they're just kind of pretending,
and they're still
like
sending the bombs.
Of course.
Yeah, and they're still attacking Rafah, right? Like this idea that there's a ground invasion is somehow, until the ground invasion, people are safe in Rafah. We saw footage today. They're bombing the displacement camps where the only protection people have is cloth tents. These attacks are happening in Rafah already and have been throughout the war. If you look at the bomb damage in Rafah, it's not like Rafah is untouched. Something like 40% of their buildings have been destroyed as well. And in places in the north, it's 80%, but it doesn't mean that Rafah has been spared in any way. There's just a lot of dynamics about Rafah that to begin the operation into Rafah, it would be a many months invasion. So if Israel's not going to negotiate for their prisoners, to exchange prisoners before the Rafah invasion, that means that they're willing to leave them in captivity for an indefinite period of time. Look at Khan Yunis as an example. The Khan Yunis invasion began in early December, and they pulled out of Khan Yunis 2 weeks ago. So there's no faster version of an invasion of Rafah. The Israelis are claiming that there's 5 battalions untouched so far in Rafah, but the suggestion has no basis in any kind of reality that they can prove. There's no data on that. But Khan Yunis and Rafah are connected by tunnels. So the brigades from the battalions from Khan Yunis can travel to Rafah. So these numbers are, Abu Ubaidah said they're gaslighting us about this idea that there's some number of fighters in Rafah that have to be attacked before Israel can claim victory in this genocide. I just think the invasion of Rafah, I think we'll be talking about the build up to it for weeks. And I think if from Israel's point of view, they need to threaten the invasion of Rafah to get the prisoner exchange negotiations to have some kind of, because they have nothing else to show for it. They don't have any leverage at all. Qassam could just simply stick to its position. And why would they change when Israel's, in this strategic bind, where their war fighting capacity is thinned on the ground? There's demonstrations all over Israel every day to try to overthrow the government. Israel's in a mess right now. They don't show any signs of a formalized invasion of Rafah that I see.
And then if we go back to the northern front, to Hizballah, again, it seems to be, from what we're seeing and what you're showing us, Jon, that Hizballah is escalating step by step. And this is what Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hizballah, said months ago, weeks ago, when some people were, there was some sort of, I think, disingenuous criticism saying, oh, Hezbollah's not doing enough. He said at the time, don't look for statements, look what happens on the field. And is that what we're seeing now? Are we seeing his words come true?
Yeah, those targets that I showed on the program last week about them taking out an Iron Dome entire battery, $50 million battery being taken out completely. There's only a limited number of these. These things can't be then thrown in and replaced quickly. There's only 10 or 12 of those units in Israel, and they just took one out. They've been targeting them multiple times over the last week. We saw the mass casualty event in that I just showed on that base. Gives you a clue of what Hezbollah could do. And there's no indication that they've even scratched the surface on their capabilities. They have a rocket and missile program that we haven't seen yet, and Israel has been preparing for that. More than 150,000 rockets and missiles that Hezbollah has. They have precision guided munitions. Israel had 7 hours to prepare for the attack from Iran, but attack from Hezbollah is seconds or minutes if they're lucky. So the escalation, the qualitative upgrade in the resistance from Hezbollah is still, I think, just only a fraction of what they possess, and that's why the U.S. sent the aircraft carrier strike group over. The aircraft carrier strike group is for Hezbollah. It's to try to keep Hezbollah in check. And that's how the Americans see it. They see the need to send tens of billions of dollars in assets to protect Israel. And that's what Abu Ubaidah was saying. Every time Israel gets in a position like this, they need to cry for help. You don't see Hezbollah calling for help from other groups. You don't see that from Ansar Allah. And the Palestinians are fighting with weapons they built with their own hands. And they're not even asking for the Arab armies to help. They've asked the Arab armies to help bring food in for people, and they can't even do that. So yeah, there's a whole other war that if Israel can't defeat the Gaza Strip's resistance, there's no way they can touch Hezbollah's resistance, and it would make Israel a miserable place to live for people if Israel is intent on fighting this war, because there's no way these units, the Radwan units, are going to move off the border without a negotiated settlement. They've agreed to do that if there is a settlement and a ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, and a legitimate prisoner exchange. They will, but short of that, people aren't going home to their communities in the north. And they say that. The Israelis themselves say that. They're all in the same hotels. People can go and interview them, and they say the same thing. We're not going home with rocket fire. We're not going home with these units right across the border. Well, Israel's training in the Galilee for any scenario they're training for. The scenario they're training for is Hezbollah Radwan units coming across the border and taking Israeli communities in the north. And the Israeli people that live in those communities want no part of that. They're not clamoring to get back into their homes at this point.
And of course, since, events now are such a fast pace, I can't even remember if we had the so-called Israeli retaliation to Iran's retaliation when we were on last week. But I think at this point, it seems very clear that Iran has achieved its major goal of changing the rules of the game and demonstrating that it does possess an effective deterrent against Israel, and that it won't hesitate to attack Israel directly should the circumstances require. And I think that is a significant shift in the balance of power, and it is now unimaginable for Israel to ever. Israel now, I mean, this was always the case, but now it's as you say, Jon, exposed to the whole world that Israel can't even defend itself without, the French and the British and predominantly the Americans and the Jordanians, apparently. And even reports the Saudis were flying refueling flights during the attempt to interdict the Iranian attack. So this is a very different, this is a very weakened Israel. I mean, even a coward, a coward, a bully with a gun can still do a lot of harm, but which is what Israel is, and that's what it's doing in Gaza to civilians. But Israel does look like a really diminished, weakened entity, and one I would say, I think we can't put an expiration date on it, but one whose days as a power in the region are numbered.
These are strategic defeats that Israel is suffering here. These are things that will stick with them for years to come. The entire world is seeing their barbarism, the pointless massacre of civilians constantly. Like just the statistics. I mean, Nora did it at the beginning, but 15,000 children to kill 15,000 children. That's the Israel. It's just they're a shame to the world. Their only defense is to attack protesters on the lawns of universities. You think those kids are going to change their mind sometime in the future? They're going to think they were wrong when they were students, but actually Israel's something else. These stains will be attached to Israel for as long as that project exists. And, Mohamed Marandi told us that on the show the other day, that people used to say, well, there needs to be an agreement. We need to do something to have an agreement. And now people are just saying, you can't have an agreement with those people. You can't have an agreement with people who treat other humans in this way, and get glee from it, to make TikTok videos and to be proud of it, to put it on your dating app as if this is something that you're proud of. It's just a debased society that it's very difficult to see how they come back from it. And that's what strategic defeat looks like. You can massacre civilians, but nobody's going to think that Israel won this war. In the years to come, CNN and all those places, they'll talk about, like they did the Iraq war. They'll lie about it like Afghanistan. They'll say they're winning. And then when the time has passed, everyone admits that no one won. The Afghans won the war in Afghanistan. Iraqis won the war in Iraq. It'll be exactly the same with this situation. Everybody knows that they lost the 2006 war with Hizballah, and that wasn't a fraction of what the resistance in Gaza has inflicted on the Israelis. And Hizballah is just constantly doling out tactical defeats of Israel that all amount to strategic defeats.
Well said. All right. Did we want to also talk about the Abu Ubaidah speech very briefly before we go to comments and a look at the page? Because it was, I don't know, like 6 weeks in between his last, Abu Ubaidah, of course, the spokesperson for Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. The last time he spoke was like early March, and then 2 nights ago, or last night. Was it last night? I don't know.
Yeah,
last night for
200.
That's right, on day 200. What you spoke a little bit about it in the beginning of your report, Jon, but what do we like? What is what's the significant? What's the major takeaway of Abu Ubaidah's speech?
I mean, his speech was a solid speech. That it's clear he knows everything that's going on. He's interacting with the news media. He's reporting on what's going on in the West Bank. He even listed the names of the West Bank villages and towns that are fighting. He listed them in the order of the last week, putting Tulkarm first, where there was a general strike in honor of the fight in Nur Sham's camp. He's just able to communicate all that stuff. It's clear the fighters are completely in the loop. It was a video message, which I think is interesting. There's no need for him to speak constantly. I don't think that we should look at how long it was in between his speeches to get any particular meaning, because at this stage of the war, he said everything. He reiterated their position on the prisoner exchange, and it just demonstrates a cogent, coherent, resistance platform that all of the other groups are fighting with as well, with a unity of struggle. He identified all the heroes of the resistance, but then, as he always does, he said that the real heroes are the children. The real heroes are the steadfastness of the people in Gaza, who are dealing with the most unbelievable, brutal circumstances. And those are the real heroes of the resistance. They're fighting in the same trench as their people. He's not giving a speech by some vaunted military commander who's above his people.
Right.
And I just think that those messages are significant. He's very aware of everything that's going on. And that's consistent with everything we've seen from the resistance videos, that nobody's hiding in a tunnel somehow separated from the world. They're clearly interacting immediately with everything that's going on. And his speech, I mean, it's on my Twitter feed if people want to look at it in English. Listen to his speeches. They're 10 minutes long. It's not a
this one was actually 20. It was,
Yeah,
I think, the longest we've seen.
Yeah, they're not Fidel Castro speeches. They're short and they're concise, and every word matters, and people should check it out and listen to it and listen to what they say for themselves. It's a principled position, and he's seen as a hero to his people. So
I mean, I think that's all right on. The only point I was going to emphasize, you made it, but I'll just emphasize it, is the coherence of the resistance position. What Abu Ubaidah expresses is the position. You don't have divisions among the resistance factions. You don't have other resistance leaders coming out and saying something different. And you contrast that to the Israeli leadership, which is in complete disarray, and not just fighting amongst each other, but Netanyahu says one thing today and a different thing tomorrow. And I think that really shows, again, the unity of purpose. It also conveys the fact that Abu Ubaidah appears looking immaculate on video, speaking, conveys to the viewer a sense of the again, the lack of achievement of the Israelis, the fact that Abu Ubaidah is still there, in a perfectly pressed uniform as he was right at the beginning, I think has to also send a message just in itself. I mean, at that superficial level, you already gave a good sense of the content. And I see people asking in the comments, who is Abu Ubaidah? And we shouldn't assume everyone knows. Abu Ubaidah is the spokesperson for the Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas. He's just known as Abu Ubaidah. What his real name is unknown to the public. He has a very recognizable voice, intonation, and when he's on video, body language, the way he moves his finger, it's also very authoritative. I can't do the Abu Ubaidah finger, but you'll see it. And he has very recognizable eyes, but the eyes are all you can see because his face and head are always wrapped, except for his eyes, in a keffiyeh. So he is also, because of that, an iconic and mysterious figure, but that sort of adds to the sort of the mystique and authority he has. But what's fundamental is the content and the steadfastness of the message, which is that, look, we're not going to surrender. We're not going to agree to any deal that doesn't include a permanent ceasefire. And if you want your people back, the Israeli prisoners of war and captives who are in Gaza, then you're going to have to make a deal on the terms of the resistance.
Right. I think one of the really interesting things about Abu Ubaidah is how much of an icon he's become across the Arab world, not only to the Palestinians
and beyond the Arab world. I see people saying how he's closely watched and popular in India, and as well as in let alone Malaysia and Indonesia and other countries where there's strong support for Palestine. So one of the, he may well be, I don't know, and student, I shouldn't say this now, but you see sort of the cliche poster of Che Guevara on college room dorms. Who knows, in a future generation, when the Minouche Shafiqs of the world are swept into the dustbin of history, and people understand that the Palestinian struggle was and is a just liberation struggle, I think Abu Ubaidah may be one of those iconic figures of the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at a Islamophobia conference in London in December where Professor Joseph Massad spoke. We've mentioned him, of course, earlier in our good friend Professor Joseph Massad, who's at Columbia University, and he made the point on this when someone raised this same point, how Abu Ubaidah has become this icon in the Arab world in particular and the global South in general, and he made the point that it's really significant because Abu Ubaidah isn't a political or even a military leader of Hamas. He is, he's from the military wing, but he's the spokesperson. And so he's become, like you were describing, Ali, how he's become this iconic figure because you never see his face. You see, he's a recognizable person, but his identity is unknown. So he's become this kind of icon, this global icon for the global South and resistance, I think. Really
one last thing. I know we want to wrap up, but Tamara, can you put, since you mentioned Professor Joseph Massad, Tamara, could you put up the article which I just dropped in the chat? This article, which Joseph Massad wrote for the Electronic Intifada on the 8th of October, so the day after the resistance operation, is the basis for the current attacks on him in Congress. So when Congressman Tim Walberg read out the fabricated quote from Joseph Massad, it was, he had taken words from this particular article and twisted them and distorted them and changed the order to create a fabricated quote from Professor Joseph Massad. But it's, that's a really fantastic article and analysis and gives some of that sense. And then finally, just to reiterate this, I'll put in the chat, Tamara, I think you had showed this briefly, Nora, in the news report or in the introduction before we spoke with Professor Mohamed Abdou. But we published also at the Electronic Intifada this response from Joseph Massad to the lies and fabrications told about him in Congress. But again, just to point out that it was that article, his original article from the Electronic Intifada, that was the basis of the attacks on him in Congress. So just to say, full support to Professor Joseph Massad. We value your work. We see you as a thought leader and a scholar of great stature, and we're very, very proud at the Electronic Intifada to have published your article, a great analysis, and to hell with those liars who can say what they want about you.
And that article has gone super, super viral. I don't know if it's our most read article ever on EI.
You're talking about the original October 8th article. Yeah, and isn't that what they call the Barbara Streisand effect?
That's right. Exactly.
So the more and more the Zionists in Congress have attacked this article and attempted to create outrage about it, the wider it has circulated. And Professor Joseph Massad is one of those analysts and people who tends to be far ahead of the rest of us in terms of seeing how things are shaping out. And people like that are often in the in the position that they're never forgiven for being right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, before we go to more articles on EI and having a look at the front page there, Asa, what are some comments from our audience over the past, 3 hours almost?
We had a lot. We had some very witty comments today. But let's start with a sort of roundup from around the world. So many, it's really interesting to see where people are watching from. So, okay, so hi from Zagreb. Somebody a Basque person in Los Angeles. Thank you. My Arabic is not good enough to read this, but I put it through the translator, and I believe it says, "Greetings from occupied Jerusalem."
Yeah.
Greetings from the US vassal state of Canada. Hello from NYC. Hello, everyone from New Orleans, Italy, Budapest, Switzerland, Sardinia.
Ciao.
Ireland. We always have lots of viewers from Ireland. Thank you, everybody. Switzerland, Stockholm, Sweden. Hi from Pakistan. Lisbon, Singapore, Antwerp, Belgium. Beirut, Austria, Thailand, Germany, loyal viewership from Wales, Prynhawn Da, good afternoon, Copenhagen, Denmark, many others. I couldn't possibly read them all. We had a lot of support, of course, for our guests as well. Lots of love for Abubaker Abed, of course. People were asking about the yellow rose. I think, if I remember correctly, even before we showed it. Regular viewer Tanweer says, wonderful to see Abubaker Abed. Thank you for sharing your update. Solidarity with you and your family. Lots of tweets, comments about the yellow roses. Wonderful. Lots of wonderful support there. And we had, we had a lot of people giving support as well to the students in Columbia as well. It's hard to keep track of all these comments, but Columbia University, of course. And let me see. I can't possibly read out all of these, but thank you everyone who wrote in. It was a good show as always.
Wonderful. Thanks, Asa. And let's take a look at the front page of EI. We have a bunch of new features up from our contributors in Gaza. There we go.
And that one at the top is by Lubna Abu Sitta. And in that one, she talks daily life in Rafah's desert camp. And she talks about how she and her family have been displaced for the third time. And they're now living at the edge of a cemetery. And both the cemetery and the tent camp keep growing bigger and growing towards each other. It's just a really dreadful reality. But we're so grateful to Lubna that she is telling the world about it, because the world has to know, and nobody can claim we didn't know.
That's right. There's some incredible new features. That one, the Sisters with Disabilities Forced to Live in Warehouse. I just read that one this morning. These are like unfathomable circumstances that people are forced to endure through this genocide. And really grateful to our writers, our contributors who are doing everything they can to keep these stories coming in. We also have some new podcast episodes, including one I did last week, just before the encampments began at Columbia, with 4 students, including one Columbia student, one at MIT, one at UPenn, and Harvard Law School, who are talking about how they're fighting back against the escalating repression on their campuses, and also, very notably, the real material links between their universities and the genocide in Gaza. So how, like, for example, MIT's, technical engineering program has research ties to producing weapons that Israel is using on Palestinian children. So,
Can I just show one more story that really
Yes.
broke my heart? But it's so easy to turn away from this, and we mustn't. And it's the one near the bottom of the front page, Tamara. That one, Israel killed my grandmother, and this is written by Maryam Mohamed al-Khatib, and she says, my grandmother Naifa al-Sawada was born in June 1932, a beautiful girl with blue eyes. She was the only daughter to her parents. They were originally from Gaza but moved to nearby Bir al-Saba, where Naifa's father Rizq worked as a merchant, and her grandmother Naifa lived to the age of 94. She survived for almost a century until the Israelis murdered her during this genocide. And Maryam was able to share, and there's a picture. If you scroll down, Tamara, we can see a picture of Naifa al-Sawada, and I just wanted to share that, and so that the whole world knows about Maryam's grandmother Naifa, and just the terrible price, the terrible price of this genocide.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ali. And with that, as we always say, like and subscribe. Please share our content. Go to the Electronic Intifada webpage, sign up to get email updates, go to our YouTube page to subscribe. You can also donate on either the EI site or through YouTube if you want to support this work and all of our contributors in Gaza and around the world. And with that, as always, Tamara Nassar, you're a legend. Thank you so much for your direction and production of this episode, as always, and all of the pre-production and post-production that goes into this. We love you, Tamara. John, Asa, Ali, everyone at EI, thank you again so much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.